What was the last straw that made you go, yep, that person is definitely crazy? Became friends with a neighbor, fellow mom and military spouse when I lived in San Diego. At first she seemed so nice, a bit reserved but friendly and helpful. She became friends with a whole group of friends I had established there. Over the course of time, she began opening up. She told us she had PTSD, she had been a police officer in Virginia when one night she and her partner got fired at. She sustained an injury to her shoulder or chest. Her partner, unfortunately, passed away that same evening. A few months later, she called me, crying. She had just found out that she had non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Her husband was deployed at the time, so my friends and I rallied around her, cleaned her home, brought her meals, ran errands for her, watched her children, and so on. Hell, we even pulled or raised funds to send her and her hubby on a mini vacation to Napa Valley when he returned from being overseas. Long story short, things started not making sense to a few of us. She refused to let any of us take her to her medical appointments and insisted on driving herself. She became demanding and very ungrateful. We noticed that she didn't exhibit any signs of someone with cancer and going through treatments. I began doing some research and found out that she had never even been a police officer. She had told coworkers at her former job, 911 dispatcher, that she was fighting cervical cancer shortly before moving to San Diego. Those coworkers did not believe her to have actually had cancer. She was not really going to treatment appointments when she said she was. I literally watched her get in her car, park it behind her home a street away, walk back to her house, and then check in at a treatment center on Facebook. There was a lot more, but that was the gist. A couple of us ladies talked and decided to confront her. We had spent lots of time and funds in helping this woman, and we wanted to let her know that we were no longer willing to do that. On the day we confronted her, she tried every trick in the book. Got angry, cried, accused us of being horrible people, and so on. When I calmly stated that we knew that she had never been a police officer and that we knew she had never been blasted in the line of duty, she lost it. She pulled her shirt off. She got within inches of myself and a friend and screamed, "Oh yeah? What's this? You mean to tell me this isn't a wound?" I began pointing at the area she told us she was fired at. There was absolutely nothing there. Nothing. Not even a freckle. At this point, I realized that this woman was severely delusional and mentally ill. My mind was completely blown. She believed the lies she told for attention and sympathy. Story 2. Not too extreme, but I had a coworker that regularly talked about how so many of her friends have screwed her over in the past. At first, I believed her and felt bad, until she told us what her latest ex-friend did. After basically calling him every name in the book, of course, she and her husband decided one day to replace their furniture. This was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and since they didn't have a truck to move their stuff, they texted their friend to see if said friend could help them, along with friend's truck. Friend said, "No, I can't because I'm busy today." Crazy Witch showed up at his house and flipped out when she saw that he was home relaxing. That's how entitled she thought she was to his vehicle and his time. She screamed about every single thing she had ever done for him, petty stuff like, "Buy you a soda when you forgot your wallet," crap. Cops had to be called. From then on out, I was careful not to accept any favors from her because I'm 90% sure the only reason she would ever do a nice thing is to throw it back in your face when you have to tell her no. She used to give one of her coworkers a ride home, and I witnessed this coworker on multiple occasions offer gas money, pay for her lunch, etc. as a thank you. She always declined with, "I'm going that way anyway," with a smile on her face. Until one day a coworker pissed her off, so she ran around telling everyone that coworker was a mooch and never once paid gas money. I don't know, maybe this is more manipulative than crazy, but she was always so miserable, so it's not like she was even getting what she wanted at the end of the day, so I consider it some kind of crazy. 100% a psychopath. I'm surprised you didn't cut ties yet. Story 3. I have so many good ones for this. I made friends with a guy who was on the fringe of our college friend group. He seemed bright and we shared interests. He was a junior chess champion and I always wanted to learn, so he was teaching me. We chatted online sometimes. His parents were divorced and his father lived in Europe somewhere and he flew over for a few weeks. I'm hanging out, cleaning out a closet at my house when he messages me. He tells me a few years back he was dating a girl and she was crazy and cruel. He'd gotten out and broken all contact, blocked her and changed all of his screen names, but she'd found him and messaged him and he was upset. Would I talk to him? I said of course and ended up chatting with him for a few hours. A few weeks later, he'd been back and we'd hung out some and he expressed interest in me romantically. I told him I was seeing someone else at the time. I actually was. Guy continued to be clingy and weird. It got to a point where I wasn't sure if I was starting to dislike him because he was annoying or if he was annoying because I disliked him. He kept acting like we were dating despite my other committed relationship that predated our friendship. I took a step back from the friendship. He messaged me telling me he'd reconnect with a girl he'd worked on a group project with while walking around campus and she'd given him her number again. I planned to get coffee. I was delighted and encouraged him to pursue it because then he'd leave me the heck alone. After the date, he checked in with me, I assumed since I'd been enthusiastic and he had no other close friends. We got coffee, talked for hours, and had a good time. Good. I told him how happy I was for him. He said, "You're not upset?" Gosh, why would I be? "You're not jealous?" "No, of course not. I'm happy for my friend." "You were supposed to be jealous." "Okay, buddy. I made the whole thing up to make you jealous." "Well, that's a little extreme. I also made up the time my ex-girlfriend contacted me in Sweden because if you don't hurt people, they don't talk to you. If you don't metaphorically hurt people, they don't talk to you?" Man, that was a thing he said. Why would he admit to being a compulsive liar? I think he wanted me to be impressed by that. I blocked him in all media and discontinued that friendship. It was a wild 2 or 3 months. Why do you think that would work? Story 4. We were newly married and Hubs worked at an office that had one fun guy that we liked to hang out with. Call him S. Well, S lived at home and asked if he could rent out our basement apartment. It seemed like a great idea. Because of the extra money and he was a fun guy, it was all good for a week or so. Then Hubs had to leave to a different city for training. So S thought he had to be the man of the house. I was a busy trauma nurse on call a lot and was hardly home, but when I was, S would barbecue dinner and be really miffed if I didn't want it, etc. That's just one example, but that type of behavior escalated. Hubs was only gone for 3 days, came back, and S behavior kept escalating. One night I was going out for girls' night and Hubs had a big black tie with his company. S was not as high up and was planning on staying home. This was back in the late 90s, so I'm not entirely sure how he found out where I was with my gang of girls at a downtown bar. About midnight, all of a sudden he shows up and tells me it's time to go. It's late. The table of my work friends became totally silent and everyone was staring at me. Also, S was wearing all of my Hubs clothes, from jacket to shirt, pants, socks, and shoes. Freaking bizarre. I sent him away, but girls' night was pretty awkward after that. He wasn't home when I got home, thank God. I told Hubs everything when he finally got home and we went to bed. The next morning, we heard thumps and a lot of loud voices. Came out of the bedroom and he was moving out and had a bunch of his high school friends there. They were moving him out, but also taking all our stuff. Laundry soap, food, etc. S saw we were up and marched over and gave us a lecture about how crappy we are and how we won't fare well without him, etc., etc. And he finally left. I know he was let go at work later on and actually felt a bit bad. He probably had some sort of mental illness, but still, very creepy experience. Story 5. My husband's cousin is the only female in the family that is around my age, so when we used to go to family functions, I tended to hang out with her. Our friendship blossomed, and she was who I considered to be my best friend. We both had 3 kids, and they all loved each other, so we just spent a lot of time together. My husband always told me she was crazy, that she would turn on me. But I just thought they grew up together and had some weird kind of sibling rivalry kind of thing going on. Her ex-husband hated her. Court cases for custody were happening all the time. It was nasty. They weren't allowed to be in the same room together per court order even. I only heard her side of the story, so I, of course, just assumed it was him that was horrible. Fast forward a few years, she's remarried and has a new baby with her new husband. She's an interior decorator and has always been struggling financially. But somehow, all of a sudden, she's buying all the things. New iPods for all the kids, including mine, gaming laptop for her oldest, furniture, electronics. She pays a year of rent so she won't have to think about it. Well, I'm over there because I'm now an approved supervisor. For the supervised visitation her ex-husband has imposed through the court, she starts screaming at her new husband for not loading the dishwasher correctly and pushes him fully, with real force, down the stairs. He somehow manages to be okay, but she doesn't stop. Runs after him with clear plans to attack. The guy has to literally flee his own home. I packed up the 3 older kids and my kids and got out of there. I didn't report it because she guilted me into thinking she had PPD and would be fine. On Valentine's Day, she decides she wants to have a party for the kids. The time didn't work out for me, so I told her we couldn't attend. She lost it and called me every name she could think of. She took things I said to her in confidence and told her whole family. I got pages and pages of scathing emails. I was crushed. 5 years later, she remarried again and had 2 more babies with a new guy. She called ECF on her 15-year-old son. Had 0 evidence, but decided because she was acting weird that this must have been what happened. After a heated altercation with a new guy where police were called, she now has lost custody of all kids and begs me to come to court to be a character witness. Because I forgot to explain the money spending, she had gotten a new big client who gave her an expense account to decorate his multi-million-dollar home. She spent about $200,000 of his money and was sued. When someone has known someone for 20 years and says they're bad news, believe them. Oh, and since you're already here, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Story 6. Started digging bits of silver foil out of the tarmac at the side of the road. He'd been perfectly sane a few days earlier and I got to watch his descent, not really realizing what I was viewing until that point. This was in India, and he was Indian but hung out mostly with Westerners, so we would often talk about spiritual matters. I noticed that these spiritual conversations would get more and more esoteric until I couldn't really get what he was talking about, but it still didn't twig. The day before I found him digging up silver foil, why is it always foil? I met him on the way home from a bar. It was definitely weird then, properly creepy. That was when I first realized he had gone mad. He started an esoteric conversation with me again, none of which made sense. It was just the two of us talking beneath a tree on a dark road with nobody else around. He handed me an invisible telephone and told me my mother wanted to talk to me, so I played along, because I was buzzed. Then his eyes went wide and he shook his head, placed one hand on each side of my face and said, "No, you never talk to your mother ever again." I was frightened and went home. A couple of days later, he disappeared, as he was taken away to the mental hospital, and he only turned up again a few weeks later, head shaved. This happens every now and again, apparently. Nowadays, I can spot the signs a lot faster when people are skirting around the borders of madness, and I make damn sure to back off a bit so I don't end up in a position like that again. Story 7. I have to say it wasn't me, but a story from a coworker of mine. It was in his basement apartment one night, and after coming out of the bathroom, one of his ex-girlfriends was standing in the hallway just staring at him. He immediately told her to get the hell out, as any person would. She followed it by pulling out a steak knife from her back pocket and swinging it around, making some pretty crazy statements. He managed to get the knife away from her, and then she pulled out another one. This girl had a pack of steak knives in her pocket, then proceeded to hurt herself. I think that's when he realized she was pretty off. She survived. They're dating now. That's when I realized my coworker was crazy. For those of you saying it's fake, I get how crazy it sounds. And if I wasn't worried about keeping some anonymity, I would release all the exact details about it. It is all 100% true. If you see how crazy a person is and you decide to date them, then you're the even crazier one. Story 8. Oh god, okay. I dated a guy for 2 months and he started talking about marriage, and that was a red flag, but I didn't do or say anything. I had to move to a different country for high school, and he began to accuse me of sleeping around and going to bars where I apparently found random men to sleep with. Mind that I was young at the time and I was in the US, so there was no way I did that. He claimed that he had friends in the same town who informed him of this. But that's not all. A friend of mine sent me pictures of him with his ex behind a nightclub. I didn't say a word, hoping he'd come out clean. Accusations of me cheating became so bad that I broke it off. A year later, he was still stalking me. He told me he joined the army just to prove to me that he wanted to get better for me, all while he was dating someone else already. He started to threaten me with self-harm so I would come back to him. This continued for a few months, and he'd do this on the daily. I got so fed up with it that I told him to go the heck ahead and do the world a favor. Well, 10 minutes later, I got a call from his supervisor threatening me with a lawsuit because I pushed him to. I was in the middle of an important internship and I lost it. I told him that if they wanted to play that game, I would sue him. The guy said he will delete my phone number from his phone and I'd never be bothered again. After a few weeks of silence, I got a message from his friend saying I should get back with my ex again. Turns out it was my ex messaging from his friend's account. Next day, his friend actually told me that there was never an army supervisor and he just wanted to scare me. There were so many other things, but those are the highlights. I came back home for a summer 2 years later, and when he saw me at a cafe talking to one of my old friends, he threw a chair at me, then tried to put his hands on me while telling me that he loves me. That was the final straw. It's been 7 years since this, and he still tries to communicate with me. Story 9. So I was heading out to get groceries with my roommates, and on our way out of our house, we found a homeless man digging through our trash. It was slightly surprising since it's not every day that you find a man looking for empties under your porch. We decided he was pretty harmless, since all he was doing was looking around, plus he was actually going out of his way to clean up our admittedly disgusting parking lot of not just bottles and cans. It was sweeping dirt, grass, and our neighbors' trash that they left unprotected under their porch, which was now swarming with wasps. We got him some empties from inside, gave him a cold drink, locked the door, and left to go get groceries. When we got there, we found out that he was still there after an hour and a half, still cleaning our parking lot. We were amazed and grateful, so we struck up a conversation. He seemed like a normal guy. He used to be a business owner, he fixed roofs for a living, he made decent money before he was homeless. He used to be married. He has kids. Unfortunately, his life kind of spiraled after he got mixed up in substance use. We just sort of thought of him as a normal dude who got mixed up with the wrong substance and then got screwed over by the system. That is, until he mentioned that the construction on our main street was a plot by the city to find the Templar's treasure. That he himself was a Templar descendant. And when he claimed that I specifically am the unknowing descendant of Templars. We let him talk and tell us stories for 2 hours before he stopped. It was so wild. It's my favorite story to tell. It was great though. Even after he had finished his iced out rambling, he proceeded to finish cleaning our parking lot and he offered to do it again for cheap if we needed it. Frank, If you ever read this, we love you. Can I get Frank's contact details? Story 10. So I was friends with this girl in high school who was a grade above me, and I thought she was so cool. She had these amazing stories of things that happened in her life. After a few years, I started to wonder if she was lying. There were little things I'd catch her in. I started to think she might be a compulsive liar. And then one day, I knew when we had a conversation in the mall parking lot. We parked, got out, and began walking to the building. Here's the conversation that followed. Me. I like your outfit. Where'd you get those shoes? Her. They're my roommates. We had a party at our house and someone stole all my shoes. Me. Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry. Her. Yeah, where'd you get your outfit? Me. Blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Her. I love that store. I got my shirt at Who Cares, and these shoes are my roommates. We took all my shoes to a bar when we were out drinking and gave them away. Me. Oh, okay. Then we keep walking, and as we get to the door, her. Let's go into Wet Seal first. That's where I bought these boots. This whole conversation happened as we walked to the mall, and her story changed 3 freaking times. And she definitely was not messing with me. What was a moment where you thought a person you knew might be an actual psychopath? As a librarian at a college, I had a student who would come into the library often. He was very charming and handsome, but it was easy to see that there was something missing inside him. He didn't seem to have any deep feelings, and he didn't care about other people at all. One of the other librarians, who used to be a social worker, noticed him too. She told me straight out, that guy shows signs of being a psychopath. Because she knew a lot about people, I believed what she said and thought she was right. This student had a way of getting different kinds of women to like him. He even bragged about tricking a married chaplain in the military into doing things she didn't want to do. After he got what he wanted, he stopped caring about her and found someone else to focus on. He kept coming to the library, studying hard, and eventually, he finished his master's degree. With his new degree, he got a job in a military base that paid really well. Even there, he used his charm to get other people to do his work for him. The librarian with his social worker past, she's the real MVP here. She's got the sixth sense for sniffing out trouble, and when she laid eyes on this guy, you could practically see the danger, psychopath ahead sign flashing over his head. She probably got a bingo card for spotting red flags, and this dude's hitting all the numbers. Story 2. When I was a kid, I had a small, furry hamster that I loved very much. It was my little pet, and I had to take care of it every day, making sure it had food, water, and a clean cage to live in. One day, my older cousin came to visit. I was proud of my hamster and wanted to show it to my cousin, so I carefully took it out of its cage and let her hold it. At first, I was excited to share my pet with her, but then I noticed that she was being too rough with my little hamster. I could see that my pet was uncomfortable, so I politely asked my cousin to please put the hamster back into its cage. Instead of listening to me, my cousin got very angry. She gave me a look that made me feel scared, and for a few long minutes, she just stood there, staring at me without saying a word. Then without any warning, she turned around and threw him. The sound of it hitting the wall was something I'll never forget, and I knew right away that it was gone. I started crying because my little friend had been taken away from me in such a cruel way. After that day, things were never the same between my cousin and me. My mom called my aunt to come and take my cousin home, and we made sure she wouldn't be around any animals anymore. It's been several years since that happened, and haven't spoken to my cousin in a long time. But I have heard stories about her from other family members. They say she's always getting into fights and that she even hurt someone so badly that they had to go to the emergency room at the hospital. It's like she can't control her anger, and it scares a lot of people, including our other cousins. She's trying to get help now by going to therapy, and she spent some time in a place called juvenile detention because of the trouble she's been in. Deep down, many of us in the family are worried that one day, her actions might lead to something even worse. We think that a special hospital, one that helps people with their thoughts and feelings, might be the best place for her to stay and get the care she needs. Story 3. One time, I had the chance to meet someone who later confessed to being involved in a series of unfortunate events that led to the loss of about 14 lives. We sat down for a talk where he shared stories from his childhood and talked about his personal life. As he spoke, it became obvious that he didn't have any interest in other people. In his eyes, they were just like those characters in video games that are there just to fill the space, not real people with feelings. This was true even for his girlfriend, his own child. This person was part of a group that wasn't always on the right side of the law, and most of his actions were just mimicking what the other influential members of the group were doing. He got a girlfriend because that's what the other guys in the group did. He bought a fancy car and made sure to wear the clothes that were popular among them. The other members quickly noticed that he wasn't scared or bothered by the idea of causing harm or getting into dangerous situations. Because of this, they chose him to be the one to carry out the tasks that required someone without fear of confrontation. During our conversation, he was always polite, but he never showed any emotion. He talked about the terrible things that had happened to him and the awful things he had done without trying to make them less serious or hiding anything. It was a conversation that I will never forget, a chilling look into the life of someone who had lost touch with the value of human life. Story 4. One evening, I found myself sitting on the bed with my ex-partner. We were in the quiet of his room, and I decided it was time to learn more about the person I was dating. So I asked him to open up, to share stories from his life, his thoughts and his feelings. But as he spoke, I realized that his words never went deeper than the surface. When it came to talking about emotions, his answers were like a shallow pond, with nothing beneath the surface. I looked into his eyes, hoping to find a spark, a reflection of his inner world, but all I saw was emptiness, a vast nothingness that left me feeling cold. It was then that I understood why I'd always struggled to read him, to feel any emotional connection. It was like a closed book, with no way for me to understand the story inside. It wasn't until after we had gone our separate ways that he revealed something to me. He told me that he couldn't feel emotions, that there was a part of him that was missing, and how much that troubled him. At the time, I didn't fully comprehend the weight of his words, but as time passed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Before we had become a couple, he had shown me a side of himself that should have been a warning. With a smile that now seems unsettling, he had boasted about his ability to manipulate others. I brushed it off, but it was a clear sign that I'd chosen to ignore. He was a master of deception, weaving lies as easily as one might breathe. And his relationships before me, they were numerous, yet each one was as fleeting as a whisper, ending within the blink of an eye. His beliefs were like the wind, changing direction with every passing day. One moment he would speak with the fervor of the devout, and the next he would reject faith altogether, embracing a life without belief. It was as if he was searching for something, but never finding what he truly sought. Despite his ever-changing nature, he was a person who could light up a room. His charm was undeniable, and his flirtatious behavior made him popular among many. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a restlessness, a need for excitement that often led him into trouble. He was a risk-taker, but his risks seemed to have no purpose, no goal in sight. As I look back on my time with him, I see the signs that I missed, the hints that pointed to a deeper issue within him. He was someone who, for whatever reason, could not connect with others on an emotional level, a trait that is often found in those who struggle with sociopathy. It was a journey that taught me much about the complexities of the human heart and the challenges that some face in navigating the world of emotions. Story 5. When I was a child, there was a neighbor who kept hamsters as pets. One afternoon, I visited her house. She began to play with the hamsters in a way that seemed harmful. She handled them tightly, causing them to react in a way she found funny. I could see that the hamsters were uncomfortable, and I told her to be careful because she might hurt them. Instead of stopping, she laughed as if it were a game. The next day, I was curious about the hamsters and asked her grandmother about them. It was then that I learned that all the hamsters had passed. It was a sad and confusing moment for me, as I couldn't understand why someone would treat living creatures so poorly. Another time, we were in her room, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a snack. As we were playing around, she picked up a kitchen utensil and started to corner me, laughing as if it were a joke. However, the situation made me feel scared and uncomfortable, as it was not a safe way to behave with household items. Years went by. I found myself thinking about my neighbor and the strange incidents from her childhood. I decided to search for her online, wondering what had become of her. To my surprise, I found a mugshot of her, which meant that she had been in trouble with the law. Story 6. During my time in high school, I was part of the soccer team. There was this one player who stood out for all the wrong reasons. He had a notoriously short temper and seemed to take pleasure in playing the sport in an overly aggressive manner. Even during our practice sessions, when the atmosphere was supposed to be more relaxed, he would go all out as if every drill was a championship game. The coaches were constantly on his case, telling him to tone it down and play within the rules. But it was like he couldn't help himself. The intensity and roughness were just part of who he was in the field. Naturally, this didn't win him any friends. In fact, most of us on the team and in the school disliked him intensely. We went out of our way to avoid him, steering clear of any potential conflicts or confrontations. As time passed and we all went our separate ways after graduation, I didn't give him much thought. However, several years later, news reached me that sent a chill down my spine. This former teammate of mine had been involved in a deeply troubling incident. He had taken the life of a classmate, and the reason was as senseless as it was shocking. A dispute over some grass. In a desperate attempt to conceal his crime, he hid it under a pile of leaves in his own backyard, as if that could somehow erase what he had done. When I heard about this, I couldn't say I was surprised. Looking back, it felt like the seeds of such an act had been sown long ago, in those heated moments in the soccer field and in his ability to control his temper. He didn't necessarily sound like a psychopath per se. Just sounds like he was a really troubled kid with a really bad temper. Story 7. Back in high school, there was a student who was the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. His actions were so outlandish that they seemed to come straight out of a movie. One moment that particularly stood out was when he decided he didn't like a substitute teacher and chose to express his displeasure in the most dramatic way possible by leaping out of a second-story window. It was the kind of behavior that left everyone shaking their heads in disbelief. But his escapades didn't end there. There were whispers and rumors about his time away from our town, stories that seemed too bizarre to be true. One tale involved him being expelled from a Catholic school for something truly shocking: drawing cruel symbols. These stories were met with a mix of skepticism and horror by those who hadn't seen his classroom antics, but for those of us who had witnessed his behavior firsthand, they were all too believable. His actions had always been erratic, but it seemed as though there was no limit to the trouble he could get into. Years went by and I found myself in college, far removed from the dramas of high school. That was until a friend approached me with a news article that hit a little too close to home. The headline was sensational and grim. Local man caught desecrating grave to craft water pipe. It didn't take much guesswork to figure out who the article was about. Story 8. A few years ago, my mother and I had an unsettling experience at our local laundromat. We were there on a routine visit, sitting on the benches provided for patrons, watching the small TV mounted on the wall to pass the time as our laundry spun in the washers. The laundromat was a place where the hum of machines and the occasional chime of a cycle ending created a backdrop to the quiet conversations that would occasionally spring up among those waiting. On this particular day, a woman approached us. She seemed friendly enough, with a smile that invited conversation. She began to talk about her job and other mundane topics, giving no indication that there was anything out of the ordinary about her. My mother and I engaged with her, sharing the polite small talk that often occurs in such public settings. As the conversation continued, I excused myself to use the restroom, leaving my mother to chat with a woman. When I returned, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. My mother was sitting alone, her face drained of color, looking as if she had seen a ghost. The woman who had been so full of casual chatter was nowhere to be seen. Concerned, I asked my mother what had happened and where the woman had gone. My mother's response sent a chill down my spine. She told me that after I had left, the woman's demeanor had changed. She'd confessed to my mother that she made regular visits to low-income neighborhoods and would steal people's pets, take them back to her home, and then subject them using tools. I was overcome with a wave of nausea and disbelief. The woman, who had seemed so pleasant and normal at first glance, had revealed a dark side. My mother recounted that despite the woman's charming exterior, she'd shown no hint of remorse or shame for her actions. It was as if she were discussing something as trivial as the weather, not the senseless harming of innocent animals. Story 9. My older sister had a peculiar way of entertaining herself that often involved causing me distress. I remember vividly the times when we were just kids. I had an intense fear of bugs, which she found to be a perfect opportunity to play pranks on me. She would dedicate hours to catching all sorts of creepy crawlies, and then, with a mischievous glint in her eye, she would deposit them into my collection of Matchbox cars. After setting her trap, she would call out to me in a voice dripping with feigned innocence, "Hey, do you want to play with your cars?" My heart would leap with joy because it was rare for her to show any interest in playing with me. I would dash over to my cars, only to find them infested with the very creatures that sent shivers down my spine. It was a cruel game that left me both frustrated and terrified. As I grew older, my interests shifted, and by that time I had developed an obsession with Barbies. My sister, ever the opportunist, found a new way to pester me. One day she took my most beloved Barbie and Ken dolls and tossed them under the bed. In a fit of defiance, I stuck my tongue out at her and resolved to retrieve my toys. My army crawled into the narrow space beneath the bed, driven by a child's determination to rescue her favorite possessions. However, as I ventured deeper, I began to feel a sharp pain in my arms. With every movement, I was being pricked. It took me a moment to understand the gravity of the situation. My sister, in her quest to outdo her previous pranks, had spent the entire morning meticulously weaving pushpins into the carpet, ensuring that their points were facing up, ready to inflict pain on anyone who dared to enter the domain. She had then lured me into this makeshift minefield with the promise of rescuing my beloved Barbies. There I was, stuck halfway under the bed with Barbie and Ken tauntingly close, yet unreachable. I was faced with a dilemma. Should I abandon my cherished dolls and retreat, or should I press on through the pain and retrieve them? With a heavy heart and a sense of resignation, I chose the latter, enduring the painful journey to reclaim what was mine. Story 10. My ex-partner had always been a bit strange. Someone who kept his emotions and thoughts tightly guarded. It was as if he lived within a self-imposed fortress, never quite letting anyone breach the walls to see the real person inside. This emotional distance was a significant challenge in a relationship, creating a gulf between us that no amount of effort seemed to bridge. One evening, we found ourselves at the home of some friends, where the atmosphere was relaxed and the conversation flowed freely. As the night wore on, the topics of discussion took a turn towards the more peculiar and unsettling. It was during this exchange that my ex introduced the subject of the dark web, a realm known for its hidden and often troubling content. He spoke of a YouTube channel that delved into the strange and obscure corners of the digital underworld. Then, with a tone that hinted at something more than idle curiosity, he posed a question to the group. Have you ever heard of crush material? The way he asked, coupled with the intensity in his gaze, made it evident that this was no casual inquiry. It felt as though he was probing, gauging our reactions to see if we shared an interest in the morbid subject. When pressed for an explanation, he provided a chilling description. As revulsion swept across our faces, he swiftly backpedaled, his laughter now a tool to deflect and dismiss the gravity of what he had just shared. Right, how could anyone be into that? He said, as if he could erase the discomfort that now hung in the air. The relationship continued to unravel, and when it finally came to an end, we sat down for a heart-to-heart conversation. It was a moment of raw honesty, where the failures and fissures of our time together were laid bare. I confessed that his reluctance to open up was rooted in fear, a fear that I wouldn't be able to accept the truth of who he was. To this day, the full extent of what he was hiding remains a mystery to me. Yet, I can't help but wonder if that unsettling conversation about crush material was a window into a part of his world he kept shrouded in secrecy, a fragment of a larger puzzle that I was never meant to solve. Story 11. During my high school years, there was a guy I knew who wasn't exactly a close friend, but due to our shared circle of acquaintances, we frequently ended up in the same social settings. Our interactions were more about being in the same place at the same time rather than any deep connection. However, one incident involving him stood out and left a lasting impression on me. It was a situation that escalated quickly. We'd been trying to sell some grass, and when someone attempted to cheat him, he reacted with a level of aggression that was shocking. He tried to use a tire iron. This act was not just about defending himself. It was about asserting control and causing harm, and it revealed a troubling aspect of his character. As time passed, he enlisted in the military and was sent to Iraq. The experiences he had there were far from ordinary. They seemed to have a profound impact on him. On one of his leaves, he returned home, and by chance, I encountered him at a bar where I was playing pool. He struck up a conversation, and it wasn't long before he began to talk about his time overseas, specifically about the act of taking lives in combat. What was most unsettling was the way he spoke about it, with a chilling nonchalance. He confessed that he found a perverse enjoyment in it, a detail that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a stark contrast to the calm and collected demeanor he typically displayed. This revelation painted a picture of a person who was capable of doing this without any apparent sense of guilt or remorse. Despite his outwardly composed nature, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeply flawed within him. It was as if he lacked the emotional depth and empathy that most people possess. After that conversation, I made a deliberate choice to steer clear of him. There was a sense that he was broken in a way that couldn't be easily mended, and it was better to keep a safe distance. While it's not my place to make psychological assessments, I've read that individuals who exhibit sociopathic traits can sometimes thrive in the structured and disciplined environment of the military. He seemed to be one of those cases, as he appeared to be successful in his army career. Story 12. In high school, there was a student who stood out for his distinct gothic appearance and rebellious nature. He was often seen wearing a black trench coat, which, combined with his overall demeanor, made him the quintessential goth rebel of our school. It was an open secret that he came from a troubled home, and his personal struggles were manifested in his defined attitude and actions. One of the most striking aspects of his rebellion was the tattoo on the inside of his lip. He would occasionally show it off, enjoying the shock and discomfort it elicited from others. His enjoyment of breaking rules extended to his behavior in school and social settings, where he would say unsettling things just to get a reaction. Despite his attempts to appear intimidating, I always sensed that beneath the tough exterior he was a deeply troubled individual. Our interactions were limited, given that he was a couple of years older than me, but they were enough to leave a lasting impression. I couldn't help but see him as a kid who was acting out due to the turmoil he was experiencing in his life. As time passed and we all went our separate ways, news from our hometown reached me that was both shocking and deeply saddening. The goth rebel, now as a grown man, had been involved in a tragic incident. He'd taken the life of his wife, claiming that it was an act of self-defense, that she had been the one to instigate the incident. However, the narrative was complicated, and rumors began to circulate that suggested a different story. It was whispered that she had been found in a position that indicated she might have been attempting to flee from him. I'm guessing that was not the story to kick this off, but if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 13. Throughout the early years of their marriage and up until I was a teenager, my parents were devoted members of the same church community. This period spanned roughly 2 decades, during which the church served as a central gathering place for many families, including ours. It was a classic small-town church, where the sense of familiarity and connection among parishioners was strong. Everyone knew each other's stories, triumphs, and struggles, creating a tight-knit community that was both supportive and, at times, all too aware of each other's personal affairs. Among the families we knew well was one that faced more than its share of hardships. The matriarch of this family, my grandmother, had taken on the monumental task of raising 7 of her grandchildren, all of whom were very young. This responsibility fell upon her shoulders due to her daughter's tumultuous life, marked by a series of failed relationships and a battle with bad habits. The grandmother's dedication to her grandchildren, while admirable, left her with little time and energy to focus on her own son, Stephen. Stephen was a figure who always seemed to be on the periphery of her social circles, known more for his odd behavior and the uneasy instilled in others rather than for any positive attributes. He was about 6 years my senior, and from a childhood perspective, he was the epitome of the strange and slightly frightening older kid that everyone tried to avoid. There was a sense among us that Stephen was troubled, and it felt as though we were all waiting for the inevitable moment when his issues would manifest in a more dramatic and perhaps dangerous way. That moment came tragically 9 years ago, when Stephen's name became associated with one of the most horrific crimes our community had ever witnessed. He broke into the apartment of a young woman at his school and committed an act of unspeakable roughness, harming her and attempting to cover it up behind her apartment complex. Some were never recovered, adding a layer of mystery and horror to the crime. The woman, who had been known for her kindness and had been one of the few people to show Stephen any form of friendship, had reportedly rejected his romantic advances. This rejection, combined with his history of troubled behavior, may have contributed to his outburst. The timing of the incident was particularly poignant, as it occurred just days before she was scheduled to return home for the summer break, a fact that added to the sense of tragedy and loss. The woman's disappearance and subsequent discovery unfolded in a way that captured the attention of the media and the public, with one particularly chilling interview featuring Stephen himself. In this interview, conducted before his involvement was known, he feigned concern for the missing woman, only to be confronted with the news of her discovery, a moment that was captured on camera and has since become a haunting piece of the story. Stephen's actions and planning, including his knowledge of the trash collection schedule, were meticulous. It was a morbid twist of fate that it was not taken away by a dump truck, as he had likely anticipated, due to a police car blocking the lane to the dumpster. This small detail, a stroke of luck for the investigators, ensured that the crime did not go unnoticed and that Stephen would face justice for his actions. Story 14. Many years ago, when I was a teacher, I had an experience that has stayed with me vividly over the years. It was during a parent-teacher conference, a meeting that is typically routine but on this occasion turned into something quite unsettling. The conference was with the parents of one of my 3rd grade students, a sweet girl who was facing some challenges in math. Her parents, both present for the discussion, seemed at first like any other concerned parents. However, as the conversation unfolded, it took an unexpected turn. The father, who introduced himself as the physics professor at a prestigious Ivy League university nearby, became the center of an awkward and disconcerting moment. When I mentioned that their daughter was struggling with the U.S. standard algorithm in math, a concept that is fundamental at this level, he expressed confusion and even frustration, stating that he didn't understand what the term algorithm meant. This was surprising, given his academic background in a field that is heavily reliant on complex algorithms. As I began to explain the concept, hoping to bridge the gap in understanding, something in the father's demeanor shifted dramatically. His face, which had been animated with conversation, suddenly became completely blank, devoid of any expression. It was as if a switch had been flipped and the warmth and engagement that had been present just moments before vanished. His wife, who had been sitting beside him, noticed this change immediately. Her reaction was telling. Her face turned pale and she began to pull at his arm, trying to get his attention, and, I believe, to redirect it away from me. The atmosphere in the room shifted from one collaborative concern to an uncomfortable tension that was palpable. I later described his expression to others as one of intense and unsettling focus, a term that captured the eerie and unsettling nature of his blank stare. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared at me with an intensity that was chilling. It was a look that, in that moment, made me feel genuinely scared, as if I were in the presence of someone who was capable of harm. Thankfully, his wife was able to persuade him to leave the room, and the conference came to an abrupt end. I felt compelled to report the incident to my principal immediately, expressing my refusal to meet with his family alone in the future. The encounter had left me shaken, and the wife's reaction to her husband's behavior only reinforced my sense of unease. From that point forward, all communication regarding the student's progress and needs was conducted solely with the mother. Story 15. During my time at university, I had the opportunity to get to know someone who, in retrospect, I am certain is a psychopath. On the surface, he was a pleasant individual, the kind of person who was easy to be around. He had a certain charm about him that was undeniable, and it was this charm that made him incredibly successful with the opposite gender. He was, without a doubt, the most adept ladies' man I've ever encountered. However, beneath his charming exterior lay a stark lack of empathy and regard for others. His interactions with women, while initially captivating, were ultimately shallow and self-serving. Once he had achieved his objectives with them, he would discard them as if they had never existed in the first place. I was a witness to his actions, seeing how he could effortlessly break up relationships that had spanned years, only to cast aside the women involved the very next morning. My suspicions about his true nature were confirmed when we took a psychology class together. It was during this class that he revealed to me, in a straightforward manner, that he had been diagnosed as a psychopath when he was a teenager. This revelation, while not entirely unexpected given his behavior, was still jarring to hear. Despite this knowledge, I wouldn't describe him as a bad person in the traditional sense. His condition shaped the way he viewed the world and the people in it, but it didn't necessarily make him malevolent. To him, people were not seen as fellow human beings, but rather as entities that provided him with enjoyment or served a purpose in his life. We spent many years engaging in activities together, such as playing Dungeons & Dragons and various board games. These times were always filled with a sense of camaraderie and fun, though they were also colored by the awareness of his unique perspective and human connections. Even though it has been close to a decade since I last saw him, he is still listed among my contacts on Facebook. Story 16. In the days of my university life, I shared a living space with a fellow student. It wasn't uncommon for his girlfriend to visit our apartment. She was a person who always brought a sense of warmth with her, not just in her behavior, but also in the form of delightful cakes she would bake and share with us. Her visits were a highlight, and over time she became an integral part of our small circle of friends, someone we all held in high regard for her kindness and the joy she brought into our lives. As we approached the end of her final semester, a time that is typically filled with a mix of anticipation and nostalgia, an event occurred that would forever change the way we viewed one of our own. It was a day like any other when my roommate returned to our apartment, his expression grave, signaling that something was amiss. He gathered us together, his voice heavy with a burden he could no longer bear alone, and proceeded to share a confession that had been entrusted to him. His girlfriend, the very same person who had filled our home with laughter and the sweet aroma of freshly baked cakes, had revealed to him a dark and disturbing secret. In a moment of unbridled anger, stemming from the disappointment of a failing class, she had committed an act of foul play against her roommate's innocent cat, and in the aftermath of her actions, she had concealed it in a field close by, hoping to hide the evidence of her crime. The revelation was met with a mixture of disbelief and horror among us. He implored my roommate to take immediate action, to report her actions to the authorities and to sever his ties with her, believing that such an act could not go unaddressed. However, he was torn, caught between the image of the person he cared for and the reality of her actions. He chose to stand by her, convinced that what she needed most in that moment was understanding and support, rather than condemnation. Even now, as time passed and the days of university life have faded into memory, I still struggle to reconcile the image of the pleasant and generous friend we knew with the individual capable of such an act. Story 17. During a period in my life, I found myself entangled in a friendship that, over time, became increasingly toxic. This friend began to treat me in a manner that was more akin to a possessive partner than a peer. She would constantly inquire about my whereabouts and the company I kept, and on numerous occasions she would become emotional, expressing her discontent with the time I chose to spend with others rather than with her. The situation reached a point where I felt overwhelmed by the demands and the emotional turmoil that this friendship was causing me. I realized that it was no longer healthy for me to continue in this dynamic, and so I made the difficult decision to end the friendship. I believed that this was the best course of action for my well-being. However, the aftermath of this decision was not as straightforward as I had hoped. My former friend, unwilling to accept the end of our relationship, resorted to manipulative tactics in an attempt to rekindle what we had. She approached her mutual friend, Mary, who was known for her kindness and friendliness, and asked to borrow her phone under the pretense of needing to text me. Mary, unaware of the true nature of the situation, facilitated this request. It wasn't until I received a phone call and heard the giggling voice of my toxic friend on the other end, revealing that she had been the one texting me, that I realized the extent of her manipulation. She tried to guilt-trip me, claiming that I had ruined our friendship and that she has always been good to me. She even went as far as to forgive me for what she perceived as my betrayal of speaking ill of her behind her back. Her attempts to re-engage with me did not stop there. She pretended to be another friend and began spreading false narratives about me to her circle of friends, portraying herself as the victim and me as the one who was being unreasonably cold and distant. She also tried to intimidate me and even had the audacity to show up at my house, acting as if nothing had changed between us. Feeling exhausted by the relentlessness of her behavior, I resorted to a rather unconventional strategy to create a definitive boundary. I told her that I had a boyfriend who did not approve of our friendship, and therefore I could no longer communicate with her. It was a fabrication, but it served its purpose in creating a clear barrier between us. Time passed, and after a year or two I received a message from her, expressing that she had changed and missed our friendship. My response was, never again. This marked the final chapter in our tumultuous relationship, and I've stood by that decision, ensuring that my life remains free from the toxicity that once consumed it. I've heard about crazy, clingy ex-girlfriends and never heard about crazy, clingy ex-best friends. That's a new one for me. Story 18. One of my dearest friends, whom I've known since our high school days, has a unique distinction that sets him apart from anyone else I've ever met. He has been officially diagnosed as an unharming psychopath, a fact that only adds to the intrigue and fascination I feel when I think about our friendship. We've been close for about 8 years now, ever since he transferred to my school in our second year. It's worth mentioning that he's Russian. I'm not entirely sure if that has any influence on his personality or the way he navigates the world around him. From the moment he arrived at our school, he made an impression that was nothing short of remarkable. He possessed a kind of effortless coolness that drew people in, making him instantly popular among both students and teachers alike. His good looks, which could easily land him a career in modeling, were just the tip of the iceberg. There was something about his demeanor, a smoothness in the way he carried himself, that was truly captivating. But it's not just his charm that makes him fascinating. He has a complete disregard for the opinions of others and an equally cavalier attitude towards his own safety and well-being. I've seen him do things that most people would consider reckless or even dangerous, from engaging in conversations with police officers while under the influence to performing daring stunts. Despite these risky behaviors, he has managed to build a successful career in sales, earning a substantial income that I know is well into the six-figure range, though he's always been modest about sharing the exact numbers. His social skills are another area where he excels. He has this innate ability to connect with anyone, to make friends instantly, and to navigate social situations with a grace that I can only admire. If I ever found myself in a situation where I was hesitant to engage, whether it was attending an event I wasn't keen on or interacting with people I didn't know well, he was the person I'd want by my side. His charm and persuasive nature could convince anyone to do just about anything, even if it meant staying up all night on a weekday, drinking and laughing until the early hours of the morning, regardless of the responsibilities that awaited us the next day. Despite a psychopathic diagnosis, which I only learned about a year and a half ago, he's not a bad person. He's simply devoid of the emotional responses that most of us take for granted. You can say anything to him, and he won't bat an eye. It's this emotional detachment that, in a strange way, I find comforting. He's always even-keeled, never one to overreact or get upset, which makes him a rock in the ever-changing tides of life. Since learning about his condition, I've paid closer attention to his behavior whenever we're together. It's truly mesmerizing to observe how he interacts with the world, how he seems to glide through social situations without a care for what others think or say. He's not rude or dismissive. He just operates in a different wavelength, one where the opinions and feelings of others barely register. I've noticed that everything he does or says is carefully crafted to suit the person he's with at the moment, a realization that came from catching him off guard on a few occasions. Yet he's so skilled at making people feel valued and understood that he can become someone's best friend in the blink of an eye. Despite everything, he remains one of my closest friends. Our time together is always filled with excitement and adventure. He's currently in a relationship with one of my friends, and I trust him implicitly, knowing that he would never cause harm intentionally. If he were to do something that hurt someone, I'm certain he wouldn't experience the emotional turmoil that most of us would. It's a part of who he is, and it's something I've come to accept and even appreciate about our friendship. Story 19. During my time in high school, I encountered a senior who left a lasting impression on me. Not for his academic prowess or athletic achievements, but for his troubling behavior and the unease he instilled in those around him. This individual, whom I observed during early football practices, was particularly aggressive, even when the sessions were meant to be non-contact, before the players were fully geared up with pads. He took an unsettling delight in using the lineman blocking pads to knock over freshmen who were significantly smaller than him. There was something in his eyes, a wild, untrustworthy look, that suggested he was deriving far too much pleasure from these acts. The same student was also known for his actions outside of sports. In my cousin's fitness class, he displayed an alarming incident that shocked many. The incident involved an exercise bike, which he hurled at another student, and it escalated when he harmed the student. The reason behind this outburst was that the victim had been talking to his girlfriend, a reaction that was both disproportionate and alarming. Unfortunately, his behavior did not improve as time went on. He became involved in more serious incidents, one of which was a robbery at a local cafe. The details of this crime were particularly concerning. He concealed his identity by wearing a mask over his head, armed himself, and got off of the entire cash register, leaving the staff and patrons in a state of fear and disbelief. Story 20. A new colleague joined our team, and it's a custom for us to gather for lunch every Friday. One Friday, it was just the two of us. We embarked on a quest for a barbecue restaurant, but found ourselves lost in a secluded road, despite being near our intended destination. We exited the car and began to follow the directions provided by Google Maps on my phone. He trailed a few steps behind me, maintaining silence. Unexpectedly, a sense of dread washed over me. The hair on my neck bristled. I was overcome with a frightening sensation and spun around to see him staring at me with an icy, lifeless gaze. He uttered, "It's a thought that crossed my mind. If we were to vanish here on this street, no one would be any the wiser." A nervous laugh escaped me, and I was at a loss for words. He inquired, "Did I scare you?" "Indeed you did," I admitted. He responded, "I'm aware." A shiver coursed through my body. We pressed on and eventually stumbled upon the restaurant, where we enjoyed our meal before returning to work. For years, this episode remained a puzzle to me. Back then, my understanding of psychopaths was limited. However, while watching a documentary about Dr. Robert Hare on YouTube, the pieces fell into place. Psychopaths have known to have a predatory nature, and it dawned on me in that fateful day, he might have entertained thoughts of causing me harm. It was a chilling revelation. Story 21. Once there was an ex-coworker who kept a special list. This list was not of friends or favorite things, but of people who had made her angry. When someone's name ended up on this list, she would do something quite troubling. If the person was a man, she would tell lies about him, saying he had done something very bad, like hurting someone in a way that is never okay. She would make up stories about being inappropriate or causing harm, even though these things were not true. She did this to 9 different men before I left the company, and she told these lies to the people in charge, the HR department. For women who found themselves on her list, she would make up other bad things to say about them and tell these lies to HR as well. She was proud of what she did and would talk about it openly, bragging about how she had never been hurt in the way she accused others of hurting her. Her goal was to make her list as long as she could, adding more names as time went on. When the HR department tried to stop her and talk to her about her behavior, she did something very sneaky. She accused them of being unfair to her because of her race. This trick worked, and she was able to keep her job because of it. I don't know where she is now, and I don't really care to find out. Her actions were hurtful and wrong. They caused a lot of trouble for many people. Guys who gave the crazy girl a chance. What happened? 20 years ago, I dated a girl who was always complaining that she didn't have any friends and that she felt lonely. We'd both just moved to new cities for university, and being an introvert myself, I understood how hard it could be to make new friends. So I offered to help her out. I tried to include her in various social activities with different groups of people I knew. We went to events, dinners, and get-togethers, but she would just sit in the corner and look unhappy, barely speaking to anyone except for the occasional one-word answer. Afterwards, she would complain about how boring everyone was. It wasn't surprising that our relationship didn't last long. I ended up breaking up with her. It seemed like it was a friendly split. However, the really strange behavior started after we broke up. About a month later, she wanted to get back together, but I wasn't interested. She started leaving gifts for me at my house, giving them to my roommate since I spent a lot of time on campus to avoid her coming over. These gifts were odd things like packages of uncooked bacon, because we had cooked bacon together one morning. There were a dozen tiny cactuses in a paper shopping bag, because I had mentioned once that I thought a cactus in a shop window looked cool. She also left 6 cans of my shaving cream and 4 pairs of the brand of drawers I wore. There was even a giant movie poster for the movie we watched the first time we'd been intimate on our couch, Deep Blue Sea. A cheese grater was another gift. I had no idea why she gave me that. There were other gifts too, but I can't remember them after all these years. These strange gifts kept coming for weeks, each with a little handwritten note explaining how the specific thing reminded her of me and some small event from our 3-month relationship, and suggesting we should get back together. The final gift was a betta fish in a small clear bag. I decided to confront her about it and went to her place on a Sunday, not knowing her family was having a barbecue. I told her to stop, that her behavior was extremely weird and that we would never get back together. She had a tantrum and started throwing plastic utensils at me as I walked away, while her mother tried to calm her down but couldn't stop her from causing a scene. I gave the betta fish to my new girlfriend.
Texted one of my old roommates from that time to help me remember the other gifts I'd forgotten. He reminded me that there was a pack of AA batteries, half a dozen limes, a giant bag of dill pickle chips, my favorite flavor, some multivitamins, one of those screwdrivers with various bits inside. This was exceptionally weird as it clearly was old and used. I suspect it belonged to her father and she just stole it and gave it to me. I think it might have been dating a cat. Unrequested weird gifts, check. Being aloof and disregarding others, check. Creating a scene, check. Complain all the time, check. Cat confirmed. Story 2. After being in a relationship for 6 months, my girlfriend and I decided to take the next step and rent an apartment together. We moved in and lived together for a couple of months. However, she started feeling unhappy and decided she wanted to break up with me and move out. We spent a day talking everything through and came up with a plan for her to move out a few days later, while I was at work. The breakup was very smooth. No arguments, no pettiness. It was the most adult ending to a relationship I'd ever experienced. The day she was supposed to move out arrived. I went to work and she moved her stuff out. She even sent me a text apologizing for things not working out and saying she wanted to stay friends. I agreed with her. When I came home from work, all her things were gone, and she had even cleaned the apartment before she left. I decided to have a few drinks that night, got a little hammered, and went to bed. But as soon as I climbed into bed, I felt something on my legs. She'd taken light bulbs and hidden them under the bed comforter, ended up needing medical treatments. I texted her from the emergency room, asking why she would do such a thing. She said she was angry that I hadn't fought harder for a relationship or to keep her. It's important to note that she was the one who wanted to end things. I used those text messages as evidence to press charges against her. About a year later, she tried to contact me on Facebook, but I did not respond. Story 3. I was in a relationship with a very sweet but also very crazy young woman named Sunny, before I started dating the woman who would later become my ex-wife. One time I shared with Sunny my dream of attending Juilliard School of Music. It was just casual conversation while we were relaxing, and I never thought anything would come of it. We eventually broke up because we realized we weren't compatible. After that, I met someone else and got engaged after a courtship that, in hindsight, was much too short. About 2 months after I moved in with my fiancé, we received a large envelope in the mail. It was addressed to our house, even though Sunny had never been there. The name on the envelope was Sunny, my last name. Inside, we found a large pamphlet and registration materials for Juilliard. There was a post-it note on top that said, "I know we're not together anymore, but I still love you. I want you to pursue your dreams." I was deeply moved by the gesture. I'd never received such a thoughtful gift in my life. However, my fiancée was furious. She was upset that my ex-girlfriend had sent a letter to an apartment she had never visited, using her first name and my last name. It probably didn't help matters that I was trying to downplay the situation by saying, "Yes, it's a bit unusual, but just look at how thoughtful it is." Story 4. This story isn't about me, but about my brother. My brother had a casual relationship with a girl from another country. They kept in touch online occasionally. She told him she was coming to visit her country and suggested they meet up. He agreed. However, it turned out she didn't just visit. She actually moved to her country because of him. He spent some time with her, roughly a month of sort of dating, before he realized what was happening. Eventually, they had a big argument and broke up. A few days later, she left a note on his door saying she was pregnant. She continued to pester him with threats for months. She even started a mommy blog and posted pictures of a supposed ultrasound, along with updates on the baby's growth. Since she was a curvy girl, she even posted a photo of her pregnant belly. She created a new Facebook profile and several fake profiles to go with it. She would comment back and forth between these profiles almost every day, talking about her difficult pregnancy and the struggle she was facing. Meanwhile, my brother started dating someone else and was trying to move on with his life. The girl continued with her deception, posting my brother's face and personal details on strange websites. This was a few years ago, so I don't remember the specifics. Eventually, she moved back to her home country and claimed to have the baby with the help of her new man, who was actually one of her fake profiles. She only posted oddly cropped photos, never showing the baby's face, just a hand here or a pair of feet there. We eventually discovered the source of the photos she had cropped. They were from a friend of her real Facebook profile who actually had a child. That's how we busted her story. This entire ordeal lasted around 12 to 15 months before she finally disappeared. Story 5. She was my first serious girlfriend. We dated on and off when I was a teenager. After our first period of dating, she falsely accused me of mistreating her and told all her friends about it. They spread the rumor, and soon many people believed I was that kind of guy. This situation was so distressing that I had to go to therapy 4 times a week for about 7 months. The experience was so devastating that I even dropped out of high school due to embarrassment, heartbreak, and fear. Despite everything, I was foolish enough to try to rekindle a relationship when she reached out to me after 7 months of no contact. She apologized for her actions. She said she had cleared things up with her friends and admitted she did it out of anger and had missed me every day since her breakup. Being an emotional wreck and still having feelings for her, I chose to believe her. Later, I discovered that she had slept with at least 3 other guys during her breakup, 2 of whom were older, while she was only the same age as me at the time. It's no surprise that things didn't work out between us. She was extremely unstable and eventually told me she had been diagnosed with a personality disorder. I'm not entirely sure if she was being truthful about this, especially since she claimed her mom pulled her out of therapy after the diagnosis. She had unrealistic expectations of me, wanting me to drop everything in my life, quit my job, and move with her to Huntington Beach while she attended college. She had no plan and no money saved. Yet she expected me to move in with her right after she graduated high school. When I told her no, it led to many problems between us. We fought frequently, and I finally ended things with her after she got mad at me for trying to help her when she left home. Following her breakup, she threatened to end it all. I encouraged her to seek therapy again, but remained firm in my decision to end our relationship. The next day, she texted me saying she was fine and looking for a therapist. I was glad to hear that, but I still refused to get back together with her. In another poor decision, I promised her I would reconsider our relationship if she continued with therapy and saw improvements in her behavior. We stayed in contact for a few weeks, during which she talked about wanting to have a child with me someday. However, I later found out she was seeing someone else, not actually pursuing therapy and just wasting my time. I removed all contact with her and haven't spoken to her in 2 years. Even after all that happened, I still hope for the best for her and wish her happiness, though I don't want her to be part of my life. Neither of us had tried to contact each other. I'm now older and haven't been able to date anyone seriously since she caused so much damage. I'm aware that I never should have tried to make things work with her, given her serious issues and my tendency to be a pushover. Story 6. I was in a relationship with a girl who genuinely believed she was spiritually a dragon. It wasn't just a casual interest, like saying, "Oh my gosh, dragons are totally my spirit animal." It was a deep conviction that she was the reincarnation of a draconic Egyptian priestess. This was my first encounter with the concept of otherkins and indigo. She also identified as an empathic vampire and claimed other unusual identities. Initially, her beliefs didn't bother me. She didn't talk much about them, and to be honest, I was quite attracted to her. We were together for several years, but over time, we realized we weren't as compatible as we thought. One of the issues that became a tipping point in our relationship was her insistence in her dragon heritage. I didn't mind her beliefs when she shared them with me, but it became awkward when she told my close friends about it. They didn't take her seriously at all, and I felt embarrassed by the situation. She was upset with their reaction, and even more so with me because I didn't defend her. She put me in a difficult position, asking me to choose between her and my friends. Months later, she ended our relationship, but it was something that was probably going to happen anyway. I didn't handle the situation well, and I admit that. In my defense, I had no idea how to deal with such a unique scenario. It wasn't like she was practicing a different religion. It just seemed like nonsense to me. And when everyone around you was laughing at such claims, I couldn't bring myself to stand up and defend something I didn't believe in. Who needs a knight in shining armor when you're dating a dragon priestess? Story 7. My first serious relationship was in college, and it was one of those situations where we felt an instant attraction and rushed into things way too fast. I thought it was normal because it was all new to me. We got engaged after just 3 months together, and I spent all the savings I'd been building since I was young to buy an engagement ring. 9 months later, we were married, and everything seemed fine for the first 30 days. However, I started noticing things that didn't add up. She had told me she graduated from college, but I found out she was actually expelled for cheating and owed $23,000 in tuition fees. Also, she claimed she changed jobs for better opportunities, but the truth was she'd been fired multiple times. I wanted to end the marriage, but the shame and embarrassment of getting a divorce after only a month felt like too much to bear. I decided to try and make things work, but that was a big mistake. We talked things out, and for a few months, everything seemed okay. Then one day she called me to say she was picking me up in a new car for a test drive. I was confused and worried because we were very poor at the time, and I couldn't understand why she was at a car dealership. She convinced me with a lie that her steering wheel locked up right outside the dealership and they would take her vehicle as a trade-in for a down payment on a new car. I fell for it and ended up signing papers for a new car. That's when I learned the truth about her financial situation. Her credit score was 389, and she had an additional $13,000 in debt to various places on top of the tuition she owed. Fast forward, I bought the car and she was fired from her job and remained unemployed for the rest of our marriage. She stopped flushing the toilet and started coming home with new tattoos after nights out with the girls. We didn't have any intimacy for 7 months. Then one night I used the computer and found her Facebook account open. Out of curiosity, I looked at her messages and discovered she had 2 boyfriends, one of whom was a tattoo artist. She blamed me for her actions and even threatened me, saying I would have to take on all her debt in the divorce. I managed to calm her down. We slept in separate rooms that night. I was terrified and had no one to turn to except for a free attorney at the courthouse for advice on how to proceed with the divorce. I asked for the cheapest way to get divorced, and they suggested a mutual dissolution since we didn't have any children. They gave me the necessary paperwork. I lied about the details and got my wife to sign the papers, making her believe we were going to court. She packed her things, thinking we were heading to a legal battle, but in reality, we were legally divorced 2 weeks after she signed the papers. For months, she would occasionally text me, asking me about court dates and lawyer updates, but I never replied. Later, my friends and family admitted they never liked her and knew she was trouble, wishing they had told me earlier, but I was too blind to see it. I've heard that she's in her third marriage, just 28 years old. She even faked having medical emergencies and held the fundraiser to pay for implants. She's been arrested multiple times, tattooed her eyebrows, and has been telling people I mistreated her. Story 8. I'm not a guy, and I have an ex-girlfriend who is now the subject of a restraining order I have against her. She moved in with me after claiming that her parents were mistreating her. From what I knew and still know, they do seem to be at least mean when they're hammered. She stayed with my parents and me rent-free. Living with us revealed that she was incapable of doing things on her own. She couldn't take care of herself because her parents had always done everything for her. She had graduated from high school and was attending the local community college, but she waited too long to sign up for classes, so her options weren't great, and she dropped out after just 2 days. For a while, she had no job, and when she finally got one, it was close to our house. Since she was still young and had no license or car, I was always responsible for driving her to appointments and wherever else she needed to go. After months of this, I realized I was more of a caregiver than a partner, and I tried to end the relationship. I did this when I was dropping her off at her parents' house for the weekend, and she did not take it well. This wasn't the first time I had mentioned wanting to split up, but it was the first time I was completely sure and serious about it. When I tried to end things, she refused to get out of the car, and once she did, she started knocking in the passenger side window, telling me she was going to harm me while laughing and crying hysterically. I drove away at that point. A few days later, we went out to a restaurant and got into an argument. I decided that since we were no longer together, I didn't need to put myself in that situation with her again. I knew she had her phone, so I told her to get a ride home with someone else and that we could talk later. She followed me out of the restaurant, stepped behind my moving vehicle and started knocking in the window, crying and screaming for me to let her in. I sat there in silence for a while and eventually let her in, driving her to the hospital where she was involuntarily committed to the psych ward. After she was released, she still tried to live with me for a few days until she broke one of the house rules and was moved out. After that, I told her I needed to stop communicating with her because she wasn't handling the breakup well, and some time apart might be good for the both of us. This worked for a while, until I noticed she was trying to get to me through all my friends I'd introduced her to. She even babysat my goddaughter and tried to get one of my good friends to invite me to hang out, planning to be there when I arrived to see my friend. After that, she went directly to my family, trying to babysit my god-siblings because I hadn't told my godparents what had happened. I didn't want to talk about it. When I explained the situation to my godparents, she wasn't allowed to watch the kids anymore. She messaged me, demanding all her stuff back, even though I'd given her everything I thought was hers. She couldn't provide a list, so I searched my house and put even the small things I thought I might have on the front porch, despite her wanting to meet me face to face. This was months after the breakup. After she took her things from the porch, she left a note in my car and a diamond necklace on my porch, texting me that I hadn't given her everything. At that point, I said if she could provide a list, I would give her her things with an officer present to ensure the exchange went smoothly. She refused and started asking for money for things she had gifted me or donated to my GoFundMe after we had already broken up. She wouldn't stop messaging me, threatening to meet me face to face and coming to my house, so I went to the courthouse and got a restraining order. In court, she had a lawyer who asked for a continuance because she had only hired him the day before the trial, even though he had a week to prepare. Now the lawyer is begging us not to pursue an actual restraining order, but to sign a document stating no contact and promising she will no longer seek financial compensation from me. Part of me wants to get the restraining order because at this point, they have zero chance of winning. I have pages of message evidence, physical evidence of harassment, and a witness. Girls can be incredibly insane. Story 9. There was this girl I knew. Not my girlfriend, but we talked a lot. I'm half Persian with 2 older sisters who can't speak Persian. I lived in Sweden for most of my youth, but now I'm in New York. In Sweden, I met this girl. At first, she was really nice, and we wrote to each other a lot, sharing our dreams and plans for the future. Our friendship grew into something more than just friends. Everything seemed great, until I started noticing some strange things about her. For instance, she was obsessed with the fact that we were both half Persian and that my sisters were too. It was like 75% of what she talked about. I didn't think much of it until she changed her name on social media to one of my sister's nicknames. That really bothered me. So I messaged her to ask why she did it. She took it personally and lashed out at me, saying all sorts of mean things about me as a person and a friend. Our relationship had become more than just friendship. We shared some intimate moments. Then she said something unexpected to me, saying she was pregnant from one of those times. I was only a teenager, barely able to take care of myself, let alone a baby. Things between us went downhill from there. I tried to support her and the baby, and we talked about our options and even planned to meet up to discuss the pregnancy. But on the day we were supposed to meet, she sent me pictures of herself badly wounded, claiming her father had harmed her after she told him she was pregnant. I rushed over to her house, ready to help her. However, when I burst into her house, I found her and my best friend naked in the living room, being intimate. Later, I discovered she had been cheating on me with my best friend and 4 other guys at the same time. She had also lied about her father and being pregnant to all of them. Checkmate. Jeez. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 10. I dated a girl for a few months a few years ago, and she was a classic textbook narcissist. She put me through a really tough time, but I'm okay now. It was a rough few months, though. She would get really angry if I didn't spend all my free time with her outside of work. She would say no to every suggestion I made to do something different, like trying new restaurants, going to the park, seeing a movie, or going to a concert. She always complained that we never did anything, even though she refused to do anything besides watch TV or movies at home. When I would hang out with my friends, who were mostly guys and maybe one of their girlfriends, she would send me a ton of messages and either go hang out with a guy friend alone or make up a story about someone flirting with her. By the time she was doing this, I was kind of hoping she would leave me for one of these guys, so I wasn't really jealous. She would find an excuse to start an argument and then storm off, expecting me to come and apologize for not being able to read her mind. About a month and a half into a relationship, she tried the break up but actually just wants the drama and expects me to fix it thing. I just agreed with her that it didn't seem like we were working out and that ending things was probably for the best. After that, she went all out to make my life miserable. She sent my mom a super long message saying how terrible I was. But thankfully, my mom saw through it without me having to explain anything. She also tried to ruin my reputation by sending a similar message to everyone I was friends with on social media. She even stole my windshield wipers a few times on rainy days and called the police on me and my roommates, accusing us of selling stuff. We weren't. But one of my roommates had a small amount of grass for personal use, so that caused some trouble for him for a few weeks. Throughout this whole time, she kept texting me about how she needed me and then would throw a tantrum. I didn't respond to her. I just kept records of everything in case there were any legal issues. In the end, the whole situation taught me to love myself and not put up with bad behavior, because it can really come back to hurt you later on. Story 11. My girlfriend was from Croatia. She was very attractive, tall, slender, and blonde, but she was also quite crazy. When she got angry, she would throw tantrums and mess up my things. One time, I bought her a $700 portable CD player. This was around 1990, and it was a lot of money for me back then. Within a few weeks, we got into an argument and she threw the CD player out the window. We lived in a third-floor apartment in the middle of a city. That was the first time she really scared me. She could have seriously injured a passersby or damaged a car. She discovered a collection of memories I kept. Letters, photos, an old shirt, just things from past relationships over the years. She started messing them up, and I had to stop her. She said I didn't need them anymore because I had her. Before she left, we had a massive argument, and I told her, "One day you'll be gone, but I'll still have all my broken furniture to remind me of you," which made her extremely angry. And yet, what I said came true. She got pregnant by my brother after cheating on me with him and then told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really loved me. Accepting me and this baby would prove it." I refused and told her to leave the apartment, which I paid for. She wouldn't go, so I left her there and moved out. She ended up being a single mother and her life was filled with various tragic events. The last time I heard from her, more than a decade after our breakup, she had been banned from her children's primary school. I asked her why. "I hurt their teacher," she said. "Why did you hurt her?" I asked. "She was rude to me and my daughter. Now I've been banned from school. I'm not allowed on school premises. It's not fair." As I've gotten older, I've become more and more relieved that I didn't marry her. And yeah, we were once engaged to be married. Story 12. Imagine this. She was my first girlfriend, from 3rd grade all the way to 7th grade. Let me set the scene for you. We're in the middle of the school hallway and she starts talking to me. She says, "Want to come over tonight?" She takes my hand. When I say no because I had plans to watch movies at a sleepover, she replies in a threatening tone, "You will come over, and I'll make sure of it." Being my first girlfriend and not knowing any better, I agreed. missing out on the sleepover. Once at her place, she wanted to do typical girl stuff, like putting makeup on me and painting my nails. When I refused, she had me stay on her bed. She even got her mom involved, and they both did all sorts of girly things on me. I wasn't allowed to get up, not even to use the bathroom. She then told me I forgot my pajamas and brought out her pretty pink princess PJs for me to wear. They fit perfectly since we were the same size. Her mom had already left the room, so she told me to wait there. She came back after about 10 minutes, having matched her nails to the one she did on me. She then decided to do my hair, and despite not caring much about my hair, I bled her. She ended up doing everything imaginable to my hair, and then she wanted to dye it pink and purple. I wasn't paying attention and just agreed. She came back with a dye and proceeded to color my entire head pink and purple. Her mom was even there, watching. After she was done, she still wanted to do buns and braids. I was confused and upset, but eventually we went to bed. Keep in mind I was there for a single day, and my parents were on vacation, so I couldn't get my own clothes. I had to wear hers the whole time. I'm a guy, and I had to go outside in girls' clothes multiple times. She would yell at me to put on the pretty outfit she laid out for me. I remember when I got upset about the braids, she did them every morning, took them out in public, and then did them again. She also made me play Tea Party and Barbie's Ponies and all sorts of girl games. I still thought all of this was normal. When I returned to school after winter break with makeup on, pink and purple hair, painted nails, and a girl power shirt, my parents were delayed because of a massive snowstorm. I had to live like that for 7 more days. I was so relieved to see my parents again. The day after they returned, she invited me over and tried to ask me to come, but I broke up with her instead. She ended up moving to a different school. And that's the end of my story. Story 13. After I finished high school, I worked at Kmart for a few months. It was a total mess there. One of my coworkers was a woman named Kat, who was probably about 10 years older than me. We both worked the night shift, unloading and stocking merchandise. She would follow me around the aisles when I worked, and it got to the point where she would come in on her days off just to follow me. One day she said her car broke down and asked for a ride home. I gave her a lift, not thinking much of it, but it turned into me driving her home every day, and the conversations always ended up being about something intimate. I never responded to her hints because I was pretty innocent back then. I started to feel like something was off about her, but I wasn't sure what. One day on the way home, she asked me to stop at her aunt's house. We went inside and it was like a Wiccan temple or shrine. It was really uncomfortable, and she told me she was Wiccan. We had a weird conversation about it. After that, we went to her house, and as I pulled up, which I had done many times before, suddenly a man came out with a weapon, telling me to leave and not to mess around with her wife anymore. I tried to explain that nothing was going on, that she just needed rides since her car was broken, but he said there was nothing wrong with her car and threatened to me if I didn't stay away. I quickly left. The next time we worked together, she acted like nothing had happened and tried to chat with me. I told her she needed to find another ride and that we shouldn't be friends anymore. She laughed it off and even dared me to confront her husband, saying it was all talk and no action. I told her to leave me alone. For the next month or so, she went completely crazy. She started following me outside of work, showing up wherever I was, like at stores as if by magic. She would throw unknown powders and liquids at me, claiming she was casting spells on me. She broke into the HR department and stole my file, then started pestering my parents with obscene phone calls or calling in the middle of the night asking for me. The only place she could have gotten their number was from my HR file. HR and store security couldn't prove she had taken anything from the office, but my file was missing. She was questioned about it and warned to stay away from me. We were moved to different departments to avoid each other. Things got so out of control that I went to the police. They said there wasn't much they could do, but an officer I knew from being a volunteer firefighter called her and scared her straight. Whatever he said worked, because she stopped her nonsense immediately and quit Kmart a few weeks later. I never saw her again. She was completely crazy. Story 14. She was plenty crazy in the relationship itself, yet after we separated, the craziness continued. For starters, I broke things off as well as I could, found her somewhere to live and helped her move out in a patient and considerate manner, then said goodbye and ceased all contact. She met someone overseas and moved there to marry him. Then she started calling me, internationally, trying to spark something again. As adamant as I was that she would stop calling, she kept it up to the point I'd ignore any calls from that country code. Then she started with the emails. She opened with a big one about how her marriage is horrible and wants advice on whether to end it or not, and promised to stop contacting me if I just gave her some friendly advice. I said my piece and my goodbyes, but of course, she kept it up. Kept emailing me every few weeks for years. Everything from a simple hey to long rants about certain memories I'd already forced myself to forget. Still trying to get back together. Up until then, I had been nice. Maybe rude a few times by not responding or hanging up as soon as I recognized her voice, but generally nice. I thought that maybe if I was mean instead, she would get over me. It seemed worth a try. So I sent some of my worst that only someone who knows you well can deliver. She took it very badly. I was screaming my full name by the end. It was painful to say those things, but I thought it might help her move on and work on her marriage. My harsh words bought me 6 months of silence. That was 7 years ago, and she still emails me to this day. I don't even read them anymore. Story 15. I'm not a guy, but an ex of mine dated this crazy girl. To start off, this ex was nice to me, but we didn't date for long since high school was ending and our goals got in the way. We stayed friends, but slowly drifted apart. About a year after we had last talked, I got a call. I mistakenly answer, and it turns out to be a girl I was then dating. She'd been going through my ex's contacts, was going through any woman, and was telling them to stay away from her boyfriend. Since it had been a while since I'd last talked to this guy, I left it be, thinking somehow he would hear word of this and deal with it. I was right, because sometime later this girl called me again, threatening me and saying that she told me to stay away from her boyfriend. I told her that I hadn't spoken to him for nearly a year and that she needed to stop calling me. It was then when I did contact my ex. When I called him, he didn't even say hi and just started explaining how crazy this girl was and apologizing. He went on to tell me that she had contacted every woman he knows of, even his sisters and cousins. When he tried to keep his phone away from her, she would get angry and would steal it from him. She has to know wherever he's going and flips if it's anything like a party. About a week after that, I saw a post in social media with a picture of him showing some mistreatments. He said that he had dumped her and then she started going crazy, claiming he was the one who was insane and that she hurt him as an act of self-defense. The moment I read that, I went through my phone and blocked her number, knowing that she would likely try to call me again. Me and my ex now talk from time to time, and the last he had seen of her was at the mall, following him and his friends. She caused the scene and security came while he and his friends booked it and ran. Story 16. When I was in college, my ex-girlfriend tried to ruin the school, but when we were together, she acted like the perfect girl. 2 weeks before she attempted to do it, she kept setting off the fire alarm, so the faculty thought it was broken. The fire alarms were going off in a place that was convenient because there was a blind spot for the cameras. The school decided to turn off the alarm system to repair it. 1 week before she tried to do it, she bought a fake positive pregnancy test on Craigslist and claimed it was hers. Then, 1 week later, as we were walking back from class in a crowded hallway, everyone noticed smoke coming from under the door of the janitor's closet. My ex came out of the closet with some tools, looking like she had failed at blackface makeup. She ran down the corridor and someone foolishly opened the closet, unleashing what she had done. We all ran screaming, and I called the fire department and campus security before getting out of the building. The police arrived and arrested her. As I walked with her to the police car, she confessed everything she had done, from faking a pregnancy to setting off the fire alarms. Story 17. Back in 2014, when I was still in middle school, there was a girl named Jane who was known for being laid back and easy to be around. I was attracted to her because of her personality and wanted to date her, so I started talking to her more and eventually we started dating. Since we were in middle school, especially a school that focused on literature, there wasn't a lot of time for relationships. However, I still tried to find moments to spend with her, but it seemed like it was never enough for her. She would constantly nag me, saying I should care more about her than my studies, and she would cry every time I didn't give her enough attention. Then, when I did give in to her demands, she would suddenly change her tune and say she loved me. To make a long story short, she came over to my house and tore up my math homework because I told her I needed to finish a missing assignment. That's when I ended the relationship. Thankfully, this happened in 8th grade, so I didn't have to see her again after we graduated. Story 18. Most of my girlfriends have been wonderful, and we've almost always ended things on good terms. However, there was one girl I dated very briefly in another city about an hour away. I had to step outside my apartment to get cell service because it was like a black hole for reception. I was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk while we were chatting on the phone. It was a nice sunny day, so it wasn't a big deal. A girl walked by and asked, "Excuse me, is this the 15th Street?" I quickly answered, "No, you need to go up 2 streets." She thanked me and I went back to my phone conversation. The whole interaction took maybe 5 seconds. The girl I was seeing heard the whole thing over the phone and it was normal because I wasn't trying to hide anything. I was just helping someone with directions. But she asked, "Who is that?" I replied, "I don't know, just some girl who was lost." Then she said, "Yeah, you probably have been with her." And she wasn't joking. Her tone was incredibly bad, as if she had caught me flirting with an ex-lover or something. That moment really ended things for me. I could see that she would be super jealous and crazy if I couldn't even give directions to a stranger without her getting upset. So we talked a bit more, and then I ended things shortly after. Story 19. I had just broken up with my girlfriend in person before leaving for an out-of-state training for my job. My roommates weren't aware that we had split up before I left. I was away for about a week, and I was really looking forward to coming back home, sleeping in my own bed and relaxing after everything. When I arrived, I took a shower and decided to take a nap. Just 30 seconds into my nap, I turned my head to the other side of the pillow, and something went into my mouth. I pulled it out, and it was a couple of really long strands of hair. I was completely confused. I went downstairs to ask my roommates if they had been in my bed. They said they hadn't, but they told me that my girlfriend had come over a couple of times that night to sleep in my bed because she missed me. Sounds like someone needs to invest in some door locks. Story 20. My ex-girlfriend decided to track down my current girlfriend after we started dating and accused me of all sorts of terrible things. However, what my ex didn't know is that my girlfriend wasn't just some new person in my life. We had known each other for years and were high school sweethearts. Life had just taken us in different directions for a while. My girlfriend wasn't intimidated by my ex and quickly shut down her accusations. A few years later, my girlfriend and I had 2 daughters, and we went on vacation to our summer house, which is located in the same town as my ex. We took our girls to a big playground, and who did I see lurking around? It was my ex. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't say anything. But my ex had other plans and contacted my girlfriend again, claiming that I was stalking her and pretending to have 2 daughters. My ex didn't come out of that situation unharmed, and I'll just leave it at that. My girlfriend thinks that my ex might still have feelings for me and didn't want me to be with anyone else, even though my ex was the one who ended a relationship. Story 21. Well, this was an online relationship with a very long distance between us, like we were on opposite sides of the world. At the beginning, she was really nice and sweet, but after some time, she started to become manipulative and would pick arguments for no reason. For example, she suggested we have a special song and she kept pushing a song she liked. I agreed to it, but then she suddenly mentioned that it was actually her and her ex's song, so she didn't want it anymore. She also wanted to Skype with me all day, every day after her school was over. This took me away from spending time with my family and friends. My personal hygiene and sleep schedule started to be affected because of this. I couldn't take it anymore, so I broke up with her after just a month. But then she tried to get me back and even threatened to hurt herself on Skype in front of me. She kept saying that if we just Skyped for 10 minutes every day, it would be okay. I tried to do that, but every time I did, she would say, "No, just 5 more minutes." And we would end up talking for another hour. My friend was really fed up with her, so he took my phone and told her off, using a very rude word. After that, I never heard from her again. People who've dated a psycho. What incident made you aware that you were dating a psycho? He had very specific preferences for how he liked his noodles cooked. Al dente, but just a little bit softer than that. He was obsessed with his texture and always insisted that I cook the noodles because, apparently, I managed to get them closer to his ideal texture than he could. One day I came home after working a 12-hour shift and a long commute of nearly an hour. The first thing he said to me was, "I'm hungry. Make some noodles." Given that he had been home all day and knowing his tendency to throw tantrums, I was too exhausted to argue. I quietly went into the kitchen and started making the noodles. I don't know if it was because of how tired I was or something else, but I didn't get the noodles out as quickly as he wanted. They ended up being softer than he usually liked. I plated the noodles, seasoned them, and set the plate down in front of him. Then I went to the bedroom to shower and get some rest. While I was halfway through changing, I suddenly heard a loud crash. A plate of noodles had been thrown against the wall. Then I felt something in the back of my head, and the next thing I remember, I was seeing the bathroom tiles turning red and the world going gray. He was hurting me, and I could barely make out his words. "You're going to regret messing with me if you ever make me soggy noodles again." When I regained consciousness, he was sitting in the living room watching TV as if nothing had happened. I tried to leave to go to the hospital, but he stopped me before I could get out the door. He blocked the exit and, with a terrifying smile that still haunts me, said, "You're not going anywhere until I get my noodles." Later that night, I managed to sneak out and walk to a nearby hospital. Police were called and I passed a restraining order. Friends from work helped me gather what was left of my belongings from the apartment. Most of my stuff had been thrown out. It was at that moment that I fully realized just how dangerous and unstable he was. I knew for certain that he was a danger to my life. Man is the only animal that refuses to be what he is. Story 2. One night after an argument that was probably about something small, my girlfriend and I were lying in bed. She somehow fell out of the bed. Maybe she rolled out, but it looked like she fell. She got up and started running into the walls. She hurt herself badly. I tried to stop her, but I couldn't. It was really upsetting and I felt helpless. Our neighbor downstairs heard the commotion and called the police. When the police arrived, they saw my girlfriend sitting on the couch. They immediately became very interested in me and seemed to suspect I might be involved. I tried to explain to them that she had been running into the walls by herself, but they found it hard to believe. Luckily, while they were there, she suddenly stood up and ran across the room, going into a wall that she almost lost consciousness. This helped show the police that my explanation was true and that she was hurting herself, not that I was responsible. The police decided to escort me to the hospital, probably because they were still unsure about me and wanted to make sure everything was okay. When we arrived at the hospital, the staff took my girlfriend into a separate room. I assumed they were asking her questions privately to make sure I wasn't hurting her. After they finished their questioning, they allowed me to join her in the back room. While we were waiting, she got out of bed and went to a cabinet where they kept the gauze. She grabbed a bunch of it and began wiping the floor. I was confused and asked her what she was doing. She told me she was cleaning the floor so the fish could see out of it. She ended up staying in the hospital for 2 months, on the top floor. During that time, I visited her regularly to see how she was doing. That was it? No follow-up? What was happening? Story 3. When I was a teen, I dated a girl for about a month with no experience in relationships. When the girl I was dating told me she liked it when guys were confident and took the initiative, I wasn't sure if she was serious. I thought she might have been joking, so I didn't try to make a move after our next date. I dropped her off at my house, and she was upset with me for not following her advice. We ended up being intimate, and she told me that I should take the initiative next time. On our next day, we were sitting in my car with the sunroof open, looking at the stars. I started engaging with her, but she pushed me away and said, "What are you doing? Do you really think I'm the kind of girl you can just put yourself on whenever you want?" Even now, I still don't know if she was testing me or if she actually had a specific preference where she wanted me to keep trying while she pretended to resist. If that was the case, she should have been very clear about it from the start. For me, if someone says no, it means no, and I'm not going to try anything after that. The whole situation was really confusing for me, and because of it, that date ended up being the last time I saw her. Story 4. He asked me to pick up a present he had bought for his friend's baby shower from Kids R Us. When I got there and asked for the order, the store staff said they didn't have any record of it. I called him to sort it out and then handed the phone to the cashier so she could talk to him. After a short while, she returned the phone to me and said, "I will not be talked to like that." I was really confused by this comment. She explained that he had been very rude to her and refused to help me with the order, so I decided to leave the store. When I got home, he denied being rude to the cashier and got angry with me for taking her side. He said I had ruined everything, that we wouldn't be going to the baby shower because his friend was very upset with us. I felt really confused and awful about the whole situation, so I decided to call his friend to apologize. When I spoke to his friend, she had no idea what I was talking about. She didn't know anything about an issue with the store or being upset. That's when I realized he had lied about the entire situation just to make me feel like a bad person. This was a wake-up call for me and made me realize he had been gaslighting me throughout our entire 3-year relationship. He was constantly making me feel bad about things he had made up to make me doubt myself. Story 5. I was dating a girl who had some pretty demanding and controlling habits. She insisted that I call her every day, which felt really restrictive. She also had a habit of hurting me if she thought I was sitting in a way she didn't like. One time she got really angry at me over something on a popular social media website in my country called Lunar Storm. On this site, you could see who visited your profile. She noticed that a lot of people from my hometown had looked at her profile and got furious. She told me that I should talk about her more so people wouldn't be curious about her. When I suggested that talking more about her might actually make people more curious, she completely lost it and screamed at me. Another time, she yelled at me because I mentioned to other people that a family member of mine had attempted to end it all before I told her about it. She was extremely upset about this. Even though she was attractive, her behavior was very unstable and difficult to handle. Eventually, I decided to break up with her. Years after the breakup, she kept sending me emails accusing me of ruining her life. A few years later, I happened to run into her on a train. She was with her new boyfriend, who looked like he was very compliant to her. Story 6. I was married to someone who turned out to be very deceitful. One day he told me he was going to the woods to end it all. I was very worried, so I called the police and told him I thought he might be having PTSD from his time in the military. The police stopped him, took his weapon, and then informed me that he was never in the military at all. This was 4 years into our marriage, and I was shocked and confused. I took photos of all the damage he had caused in her home, including holes in the walls, and decided to get a restraining order and a divorce. The court doesn't look favorably on someone using false military service as an excuse for his actions. After I took a nap and woke up to see a lot of comments and upvotes on my post, I realized that my ex was actually good for something, getting attention to my story. To give more context, my first husband was a real veteran and preferred that we not discuss his military service after he retired. We lived near a military base, so it was normal for me not to talk about his service. His brothers were also in the military, and my ex claimed to be embarrassed for not being like them, so I respected his wish and didn't bring it up at family events. It turned out that he was very good at deceiving people. He was a skilled con artist, manipulator. He did the same things to his second wife, who also ended up divorcing him. Story 7. This happened to a friend of mine, not to me. His girlfriend had been traveling to a particular city for months because her mother was sick with lupus and needed a lot of care. One day, just before leaving for another trip to visit her mother, she broke up with my friend. She said she felt like she was being a bad girlfriend because she couldn't spend enough time with him. My friend handled the breakup really well and wished her the best. He even said that they might get back together once her mother got better. That weekend, she kept texting him about how tough it was to take care of her mother and how she hadn't slept at all because she was staying at the hospital. During all of this, my friend was incredibly supportive. He sent her information about lupus and other helpful stuff. A few days later, my friend was scrolling through Facebook and saw a 360-degree panoramic photo posted by someone he knew who had also been involved with his ex. The picture was taken at a popular music festival in the city where his ex's mother lived. When my friend looked closely at the photo, he saw his ex in the crowd, clearly having a great time at the festival with his ex. It turns out that instead of visiting her sick mother, she had actually gone to the music festival and got back together with a guy. My friend found photos of her at the festival all weekend, which meant she was there the whole time and all her texts about being at the hospital were lies. He even started to question if her mother ever had lupus, or if she was just using that as an excuse to be with a guy. When my friend confronted her about it, she just ignored him and disappeared. It was completely odd. It wasn't even that angry, mostly just sad for her. He felt that she could have broken up with him months earlier, but instead, she chose to lie a lot so she could have both the relationship and her time with this other guy. My friend really wonders if she feels any guilt or remorse about what she did. My friend has started going to therapy and is doing really well. He understands that he might have some trust issues in the future, so he wants to address them as soon as possible. I'm really impressed with how he's handling this difficult situation emotionally. Story 8. When I was very young and naive, something happened that has stayed with me and affected my mental health. It started suddenly, got really bad. It began with him posting all of my personal information online. He shared my full name, address, and other details where anyone could see them. That was already very upsetting. Then he started sending me proof of him hurting himself. He'd share videos of him consuming entire containers of tablets. That was when I knew I needed to get away from him. Story 9. We were having dinner at a restaurant when he suddenly got up and started shouting. He yelled things like, "I'm going to fire out all your windows." This was because he saw a waiter glance at me. He also attempted to hurt me, claimed he was younger than he really was. He even hid his ID from me, which I found out the reason for later, and lied about almost everything. He also kept unregistered weapons in his house, which made him seem very shady. I ended up leaving him after he got so angry that he hurt our kitten. I took the kitten with me. Looking back, I realized I was really naive. Story 10. We met at bars because we both enjoyed drinking. I could easily finish a fifth of vodka in one night, and so could she, even though she weighed 135 pounds. She would often stay over and we'd spend the evenings drinking in the tub or watching movies with drinks. Sometimes I'd wake up to her pounding drinks at 5 a.m. I decided to limit the drinks in the house because she would drink all day if there was too much. One morning when I had run out of intoxicants, she demanded that I take her to the store to buy her a Four Loko. I was already running late for work and tried to leave, but she was only in a robe and insisted on coming with me. She wouldn't get out of the car until I got her the drink. I drove past a nearby 7-Eleven and she got so mad that she threw my car into park while I was driving 40 miles per hour. She was definitely a mix of beauty but deeply troubled. Story 11. When I was younger and had my first long-term boyfriend, it wasn't obvious at first. He had some strange habits that seemed small at the beginning. If he was focused on something, he'd ignore me, even if he had invited me to join them. He wasn't bad, just odd. As time went on, he started making me cancel my plans to spend time with him instead. He isolated me, so I was almost always with him, and he would monitor everything I did, including looking through my phone. One time, a friend kissed me on the cheek in front of him as a joke, and although he laughed, he later yelled at me about it. He showed different sides of himself to different people. Over time, his behavior escalated from being a caring boyfriend to controlling me completely. Thankfully, one day he suddenly lost interest, like a switch. It was painful to be dumped without explanation, but looking back, I'm grateful it happened. About 6 months ago, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm not sure of the details, but he's in the spectrum of that condition. Story 12. It was a typical Sunday evening. My ex-husband had been unemployed for a few years and knew I had to approve dozens of employees' time cards every Sunday night to process payroll for Monday. This task took about an hour and a half and had been doing it every week for 3 years. My ex was a heavy drinker with a terrible temper. That night, after I had spent an hour cooking dinner for him and our son, he got very upset about me working on the time cards. I was sitting on the living room floor because we couldn't afford a couch. As I was eating dinner and working, he started yelling at me to stop working and pay attention to him. Before I could even explain that I just needed a few more minutes, he came up to me with a plate of food. He took a big bite of tilapia, chewed it, and then reached over my keyboard. I was in complete shock. I couldn't believe that the man I was married to would do something so awful. I just sat there stunned. Story 13. I went to get an IUD, but it went terribly wrong, and I ended up passing out. I had to go to the ER for an ultrasound. My boyfriend was mostly worried about the intimacy, which was frustrating until my roommate got really angry at him. He then said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was a misunderstanding." I also needed infusions at the center from ulcerative colitis. I wanted him to come with me because it gets boring and he makes it easier, especially since it often takes several tries to find a vein. The infusion takes about 4 hours, but he didn't want to come. I told him it was okay, but he offered to pick me up. When the infusion ran 15 minutes late because they used a very small syringe, he got angry, left, and I had to call an Uber to get home because he didn't want to wait. The final straw was when I had spent the past few months taking care of him while he had a severe case of disease. We had plans to move to a different state because I got my dream job and he said he wanted to be with me. He was there for my graduation and we took lots of photos, but just 3 days later, he broke up with me over the phone, blocked my number, and gave no explanation. He has tried to contact me a few times since then, but the last time I told him to leave me alone and blocked his number again. Story 14. I was the psycho in this situation, though I don't like using that term because it adds to the stigma around mental health. I have borderline personality disorder, or BPD. When I was a teenager, I was undiagnosed and extremely stressed, living with a mistreating parent with a drinking problem. During that time, I had very little self-control. I was mean and manipulative, using relationships and friendships to gain power and control over others. I didn't like how I acted and hated myself for being mean. I was struggling a lot with my mental health, but I'm not saying that's an excuse for my behavior, just an explanation. I felt like I had no control over my own life, so I tried to control other people as a way to cope. People with borderline personality disorder, or BPD, might seem like they're just causing chaos and trouble, but in reality, we're very sensitive. We don't have much emotional protection, so we often put on a tough, mean front to protect ourselves. BPD is more common in women, so that tough persona can sometimes be seen as a tough girl attitude. People with BPD are extremely afraid of abandonment, either real or perceived. We're terrified that people we love, trust, or look up to will abandon us. We fear that we'll be judged as harshly as we judge ourselves. We have chronically low self-esteem, unstable self-image, believe we're not deserving of love, and we're unworthy of healthy relationships. So what do? Well, if we believe someone is going to leave us anyway, we prefer to strike preemptively. I'm going to be as terrible as possible, so you'll break up with me. We also struggle with compartmentalization, meaning we flip-flop between black and white, love and hate, good and evil. If you're being nice to us, we absolutely idolize you, trust you completely, worship you as a god, and believe you're not capable of doing anything wrong. Then when you inevitably make a mistake, since you're only human of course, we immediately flip 180 degrees and demonize your entire existence. Not because we actually hate you, but rather in self-defense from perceived threat of abandonment or rejection. That's a really good book in this subject with a benefiting title, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. I would encourage anyone struggling with BPD, either because you have it, your partner does, or even if you think your ex might have, to read it. It's incredibly helpful in understanding the chaotic storm of emotions and destructive behaviors. The key thing to know is that people with BPD are almost always being self-destructive. We're really trying to hurt ourselves, not other people. The rates of these bad habits are extremely frequent for us. It's also important that partners of people with BPD seek therapy or at least find some ways to process what they've endured. There's some legitimate trauma that can stem from those relationships, for both partners. I was finally diagnosed with an unholy combination of PTSD, OCD, ADHD, and anxiety, all in the last 2 years. However, I've made so much progress that my current therapist and doctor both aren't sure if I have enough qualifying BPD traits left, especially after doing DBT and CBT for so long. I wish I had been given the resources at the time to figure myself out. I wish someone had noticed how much pain I was in, that I was being taken advantage of, but that I desperately wanted to be loved. I wish I could say I'm sorry to the people I hurt. Not that I really deserve forgiveness. Grace is earned, not owed, but I still live with guilt over my past and make a conscious effort to be a better person every day. Oh, one bit of interesting news. BPD might undergo a name change to emotional instability disorder, possibly reclassifying it as not a personality disorder anymore too. And the upcoming DSM-6, as more researchers are advocating to end the negative stigma towards it and mental health in general, I ended up going into the psych field myself. forensic psych degree, and my primary focus and field of study is personality disorders. That's the best way to turn things around, in my opinion. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 15. I went to his place before he got home from work. As usual, I used to open his computer all the time because I knew the password. That day I found a bunch of dating sites open, like Flaying and Cougar Life. I couldn't believe it. I looked at his messages and saw he had been trying to meet up with women nearby for a while. I called him and he panicked, saying he set up the accounts for a friend. I knew he was lying, but I wanted closure, so I stayed to wait for him to come home. That was a mistake. When he got home, I broke up with him and things got really scary. He took my phone and keys, shut the door, and blocked me from leaving. It was terrifying because he was much bigger than me, and I felt completely powerless. Eventually, I ended up on the couch, feeling detached from everything. That's when I realized how harsh he had been. I had been in a bad situation for a while without fully understanding it. I finally talked him down and he let me go. I didn't go to the police because I was in shock, but I had bruises on my arm and I was shaky for days. Found out way later that he was charged with false imprisonment of another woman down the line and he only received probation. And I really wish I'd gone to the cops when it happened to me. If I had, I have no doubt that he'd be in prison now after his second offense. You want to know the worst part? I ended up getting back together with him and stayed with him for a few more months. Things got even worse before we finally broke up for good. After that, he tried to contact me for years. Even now, I still have panic attacks when I hear a man yelling at a woman and I get nervous about unknown phone numbers. I check court records now and then, hoping he's not around or in prison. I'm not dumb. I know how hard it is to leave a traumatic relationship. I have a lot more understanding now for women who stay with their bad partners. What an incredible yet heartbreaking story. Stay strong, ladies. You can do it. Don't wait until it's too late. Story 16. It all started with seemingly small issues. At first, he would compare me to his exes, but he always did it in a way that made it sound like he was being positive about me. He seemed really eager to join in on the activities and hobbies I enjoyed on my own. He would push his way into these activities, and although he initially seemed enthusiastic, he would often end up pouting or making fun of them. These comments started as harmless jokes about my interests, which I would laugh off, but they kept getting more frequent and more hurtful over time. He also started giving me backhanded compliments. These were subtle put-downs disguised as compliments. Whenever I caught on and got upset about his comments, he would just smile and say he was joking, but his smile never reached his eyes, making it clear that he wasn't really sincere. Despite his behavior, he had the most striking blue eyes I had ever seen. They were so light they almost looked white. However, I began to notice that there was something missing behind those beautiful eyes, an emptiness that troubled me. One night, while we were relaxing on the couch, drinking and watching a game, he suddenly said he wanted to end it all. I took his comment seriously and began asking him more questions about it. He just shook his head back and forth as if he was in a daze and said he hadn't said that at all. His reaction was confusing and unsettling. Things got only worse from there. The emotional mistreatment, which had started with subtle remarks, escalated into more overt and damaging behavior. Although I knew things were getting bad, I still remembered the good times we had shared, which made it hard for me to leave. Eventually, things came to a head when he hurt me in a fit of rage. Afterward, he tried to make amends by calling me, showing up at my work and sending me flowers. My sister played a crucial role in helping me through this difficult time. I hadn't shared much of what was going on with my family because she had been isolating me and making me feel like I was overreacting. When he mistreated me, I went straight to my sister for help. Even though he kept calling and texting me while I was with her, she took my phone and told me firmly, "He's putting you in danger. You know that, right?" Her words were a wake-up call. I left him, left everything I had at his house, and eventually moved on. It took years of healing and dating people who were more stable and grounded, but I finally moved past it. Story 17. Here's a simplified version of what happened. I'd planned a date with a girl I'd been chatting with online. When I picked her up, she was already on the phone with her estranged father. She got in the car and I started driving us to the movies. She stayed on the phone with him the whole day, which was about 15 minutes. It turned out she was asking him for money because she needed help with his situation. She'd removed him out of her life years ago, but was now trying to make amends so he'd send her money. Halfway to the movie, she asked if I could stop at the Dollar General so she could buy a green dot card or something similar. Even though we hadn't met before and it felt awkward, I agreed. She went into the store, stayed on the phone, and came out with a card. While she was crying and pretending to be emotional, she gave her father the card details and thanked him for the money. After hanging up, she abruptly switched from her emotional act, spoke to her father rudely, and then cheerfully apologized for the awkwardness as if nothing had happened. That's definitely a good warning sign. Seems like she was extremely manipulative and deceitful. Story 18. My husband has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and sometimes shows signs of schizophrenia. He wasn't like this until about 8 years into our relationship. Out of nowhere, he lost all trust in me. He started having hallucinations and believed they proved I was unfaithful. If I wore a nice dress or makeup, he saw it as a sign of infidelity. His jealousy grew out of control. He would ignore me for days and then get angry if he saw me talking to a coworker or smiling at a store clerk. He even began logging into my Google account and tracking my phone. If my location showed that I was near a restaurant where my work is located, he would think I was lying about being at work. I was extremely unhappy. The person I had trusted and built a life with suddenly turned against me. We agreed he needed to see a doctor, and he did. With his diagnosis, I realized he was experiencing differently beyond normal. Things are starting to improve now. Story 19. I worked with my ex because we were both correctional officers. This job involves a lot of background checks and mental health assessments, so I thought it would be a good way to make sure he was stable and trustworthy. We dated for a few months before I moved in with him. About a year into our relationship, after we found out we were expecting a baby, he started to change dramatically. One night while I was tucking my oldest son from my previous marriage into bed, he told me with tears in his eyes, "Mama, I see the devil in his eyes." This really scared me. We had already noticed that his behavior was becoming erratic and unsettling. He started saying things that made us worried about his mental health. The first major sign of trouble was how he seemed to switch between different personalities depending on the situation. This made it hard to know who he was or how he would react. While I was getting the house ready for the new baby, I discovered a box of books about something called verbal judo. I'd never heard of this before, and it made me realize that something was seriously wrong. As I began to understand what was going on, his behavior became even more threatening. He started making threats about what he would do if I tried to leave him. He would show us a projectile he claimed had his name on it, leaving it in places where we could see it or just leaving it lying around. He even hung a noose on the back deck of our house, letting it swing in the wind for weeks as a frightening warning. Eventually, I managed to get myself and my boys out of that dangerous situation, but things didn't get better right away. In fact, they got worse. His friends from the sheriff's office began following me wherever I went. I had never had any legal trouble before this, not even a speeding ticket. One time while I was shopping at Walmart, a security guard who was a friend of his accused me of shoplifting. They claimed to have video evidence of me stealing, but the video footage was mysteriously lost, and the charges were eventually dropped. Despite this, the intimidation continued. Now I'm in a legal battle for custody of my son. My ex is keeping him from me out of spite, and it tears me apart every day. I worry about what my son might be going through and feel helpless because I can't be there to protect him. Story 20. I used to be really messed up, and I realize now that I was the problem in my past relationship. We were together for 6 years, and it wasn't until she broke up with me that I started to understand how badly I had acted. I had to go through therapy and do a lot of work on myself to get better. I could come up with reasons for my behavior, but honestly, they're just excuses. I was just being mean and didn't want to admit that I was the one at fault. After we broke up, I tried to win her back in really unhealthy ways. For example, I made paper hearts with messages about how much I loved her and placed them all over her car while she was at work. To me, it didn't seem like stalking, but looking back, that's exactly what it was. She didn't appreciate this gesture, and when she didn't respond the way I wanted, I blamed her for taking away my chance to be with her. I accused her of stealing my time, affection, and emotional connection, even though she was trying to move on and had already made it clear she didn't want to be with me. I also tried to ruin her new relationship by snooping through her email and Facebook accounts. I found some conversations that I thought were inappropriate and sent screenshots of them to her parents, who I knew well. I tried to do this anonymously, but when she confronted me about it, I lied and said I didn't know who was responsible. We both knew I wasn't fooling anyone. As if that wasn't enough, I started all bad habits as a way to get back at her for the pain I felt. It was my way of retaliating and coping with the hurt, but it only made things worse. It hurts to remind myself of all this, so I'll stop there. I'm a better person now, but it took therapy, rehab, and God himself to make me realize I was for society and men as a whole. I watched my life go off-road and straight for a pedestrian walkway, and the scariest thing was that I was behind the wheel and knew it. I couldn't pretend to be innocent and inexperienced. I couldn't claim unending heartbreak, and I couldn't put the blame on someone who, through no fault of her own, just stopped loving me. I was hurt, and I wanted her to hurt as bad as I did, and so I destroyed everything around me that I cared about. I love all the wonderful things and great friends I found in therapy and rehab, but I wish I'd learned those things before acting out. When you show colors like that, No matter how much better you've gotten, people just don't trust or like you anymore. I'll probably have to move someday so I can have a name that doesn't turn faces into hateful, angry sneers of pure disdain. I'm a scourge in this town, and no matter how much you try to clean a blackened name into at least a semblance of a memory of white, everyone will remember only the color they saw when the spotlight landed on you when it was time to show everyone what you're made of. Regardless of what I am made of now, when it counted and everyone was watching me at that moment, I was made of hate and anger and bitterness, and no one will forget it. Story 21. Not quite as strange, but while driving to a coffee shop where I was supposed to work on my thesis, my ex and I heard on the radio about the aircraft hitting the towers. I then said, "That wasn't an accident." He called me a bunch of awful comments and rambled on about how ignorant it was to acknowledge that. Of course it was an accident. Nobody would do that on purpose. When we arrived at the coffee shop, a TV and a cart had been rolled out and placed in the center of the dining area so that the customers can watch what's happening. He observed while sitting. As we watched live footage, one of the towers eventually collapsed. I immediately started crying when I realized I had just seen innocent people pass away. I was shocked to see that some people were still inside the building. My brother was traveling at the time and his plane had to land early. He had to rent a car to get home, but luckily he was safe. I was deeply horrified. Anyone with a heart would have been, too. My ex, who was sitting next to me, bent over and I assumed he was trying to comfort me when he wrapped his arm around me. "You are embarrassing me. Stop crying. It's making a scene." He growled at me. I realized I was done with the relationship and started planning to leave since we shared an apartment. After an argument one day, I wanted to go out with friends, but he got upset and didn't want me to go. He had me against the wall, wanting to hurt me, then laughed it off. The next day, while he was at work, I packed my things and left. He was devastated, but he just didn't seem to understand how serious it was. Story 21. Please bear with me as I share a troubling experience from my past. I was dating a guy who claimed he was a firefighter in New York. For a while, everything seemed fine, but after a few months, I discovered that he wasn't actually a firefighter. Instead, he was getting used to intoxicants with serious issues. When I decided to end the relationship, things took a dark turn. He started making threats, saying that I couldn't leave him because he was involved with the mafia. He claimed that if I broke up with him, his guys would come after me and my family. He even told me he had a detailed file on my father and his business, that he knew everything about them. The moment I realized just how unhinged he was during a particularly alarming incident, one day he showed up at my car covered in red liquid and said he had been jumped. He begged me to drive him to the hospital. I took him there, but once we arrived, the doctor pulled me aside and said he suspected that he had actually inflicted self-injury on himself. It turned out that his whole story was a fabrication designed to manipulate me into feeling sorry for him and to get me to take him to the hospital. After that night, things went from bad to worse. He trapped me in the relationship for several months. On one occasion, he threatened me with a weapon and wouldn't let me go to work because he said someone named Tony was coming over to meet me. Of course, Tony never showed up. He also left me threatening voicemails, which only made things more terrifying. I tried to seek help by calling the police and played them one of the threatening voicemails, but they told me there was nothing they could do with just that information. I also went to get a restraining order, only to find out that he already had 9 restraining orders against him, mostly from his own parents. Eventually, I managed to escape the situation by moving to a different state. It was a horrifying experience, but getting out of that environment was crucial for my safety and well-being. Story 23. I dated a girl in college for 2 years. It took me far too long to realize she was not for me. My friends noticed it from the start. There were some subtle signs of her controlling behavior during our relationship, but I didn't fully understand the extent until we broke up. The real trouble began after our breakup. I worked with a group of friends on campus during the summer, and we were given free housing as part of our job. She also had a similar arrangement but worked for a different department. By this time, we had already ended our relationship. One of the strangest things she did was hang out by a large rock near my building. Every time I walked past it, she would be sitting there, crying. If I walked by with friends, she would give us intense stares. On one occasion, when I walked by with a female friend, I got a text from her within minutes accusing me of being involved with her. Things got even weirder when she started spying on me. The building where we were staying had a courtyard in the middle, with my room on one side and my friend's room directly across from me. One night, while I was hanging out in my room, my friends across the courtyard called me to say they had seen my ex hiding in the bushes under my window, dressed in all black, trying to spy on me. When I called her to confront her, she claimed she was at Walmart. The final straw came at a big spring concert at my college. I was there with my new girlfriend, who is now my wife, and, surprise, my ex was there too. She came up to us, looked at my wife, looked at me, and said, "This is fine. I don't care. This is totally fine," before walking away. Looking back, I can't believe I stayed in that relationship for 2 years. Story 24. There were countless troubling moments with the person I refer to as my psycho ex, but I only occasionally talk about him because of how distressing those memories are. One of the first and most significant warning signs came early in our relationship, during the first month we were together. Instead of fostering a supportive and healthy relationship, he chose to embarrass me for showing any signs of attraction or desire. He had a deeply troubling belief that only immoral women would actively express or seek out intimacy, even within a committed relationship. He constantly made me feel guilty for my natural feelings and tried to control how I viewed our closeness. The situation escalated dramatically the first time we were intimate. Instead of approaching her first with care and respect, he chose to violate my boundaries and trust. While I was asleep, he took advantage of me. This was both painful and deeply distressing. His rationale was rooted in his twisted belief, where he thought that women who enjoyed intimacy were somehow flawed or deserving of punishment. By having me into an experience that was painful and non-consensual, he made it clear that he wanted to enforce his disturbing views on me, regardless of my comfort or consent. These early incidents were just the beginning of a pattern of bad behavior that would define a relationship, which shows his disregard for my well-being and boundaries. When I was able to get income and started eating regularly, returning to a healthy weight, it would show me pictures of me he took without my consent in those first few months and tell me how I looked so much better then. Story 25. One evening, he invited a bunch of people over to hang out by his fire pit so I could meet his friends. I ended up getting along well with some of his guy friends because we had similar tastes in movies. But there was no flirting involved. As the last person was leaving, he and I were standing in the backyard by the gate. He suddenly grabbed me and pulled me towards him. I thought he was just going in for a hug, but that wasn't the case. It turned out he was upset that I got along so well with his friends. He was worried that they might steal me away from him, which I didn't understand at all. To make things even stranger, he had a large stick in his hand when he had pulled me from the fire. The stick was about 1 inch in diameter and still red hot. Instead of pulling me close for a hug, he was actually trying to pull my pants away from my body so he could brand me with a stick in a place that no one would see. I didn't notice the stick at first, but it left a scar. Thankfully, I don't have him in my life anymore. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.